Tonight, we explore a different fate for Jon Snow, a world where Robert Baratheon, arriving at Winterfell for his visit north, learned the truth about the boy he had always assumed was Ned's bastard. Not through design, not through a whisper campaign, through Robert being Robert. Too loud, too observant when he was drunk, and too stubborn to let a thing go once he had hold of it. Learning that Jon was Lyanna's son would not make Robert hate the boy. It would do something far more dangerous. It would make Robert want to claim him. Taken from everything he knew, the north, the grey walls, the cold and the wolves, Jon Snow would be brought to King's Landing as Robert's ward, his trophy, his grief made flesh and housed in the Red Keep. Growing up beside Joffrey, Cersei's enemy, in the most dangerous court in the world, Jon would face a test that the Wall never could have prepared him for. And the truth of his Targaryen blood, coiled inside him like a sleeping thing, would eventually wake up. This is the story of what might have happened if Robert Baratheon took Jon Snow to King's Landing. Winterfell. What Robert found, 298 AC. Robert Baratheon arrived at Winterfell with a court the size of a small army and a hangover the size of the Reach. He had been drinking since Harrenhal. Not the ordinary Robert drinking, which was already substantial. The specific drinking that Robert reserved for long journeys north, the kind that insulated him from the cold and the tedium, and the specific weight of being king of a realm he had wanted to win and did not particularly want to run. He arrived at Winterfell's gates with wine on his breath, and Cersei at his side radiating the particular hostility she reserved for places that reminded her of Lyanna Stark, and the combination made the reception feel like an event that was already in the process of going wrong. Ned met him at the gate. The reunion was the specific reunion of two men who had loved each other greatly and who had spent 15 years conducting that love across a distance that had bent it without breaking it. They embraced. Robert was loud about it. He was loud about everything. He said, "You're greyer, old friend," and he said it with the specific Robert warmth that forgave the observation. The feast that night was long and loud and northern in the way Robert had always found the north to be. Real food, real fires, men who said what they meant and drank to mean something rather than to perform. He ate too much and drank more than too much, and told stories about the court that became funnier with each retelling and less accurate with each cup. He noticed Jon at the far end of the table. Not immediately. He was 20 feet away, and the hall was full, and the firelight was doing the thing firelight did to faces, making everyone look slightly younger than they were, and slightly more alive than courts usually permitted. But he noticed him, because Jon Stark had a face that was hard not to notice. The dark hair, the grey eyes, the specific arrangement of those eyes, that was Ned's coloring without being Ned's expression. Something else in the expression. Something familiar. Robert drank more wine. He watched the boy throughout the meal. 14 years old, sitting at the side table with Theon Greyjoy, who was being too loud, and Jon, who was being too quiet. The specific Jon quiet that wasn't shyness. The quiet of someone who was watching everything in the room and processing it and showing nothing of the processing. The thought came later, in his chambers. Cersei had gone to her own rooms. This too was a performance they had maintained for years, the sleeping in separate spaces that communicated to the court that they communicated nothing to each other in private. Robert sat alone with a candle and the last of his wine, and he sat with the thought that had been assembling itself since the feast. Dark hair, grey eyes, but not Ned's grey, colder grey, a different grey, the grey that ran in a specific Westerosi bloodline, and that Robert had studied obsessively for 15 years in the hope of not seeing it again. Lyanna had grey eyes. Jon had grey eyes. Robert drank the last of his wine. He sat in the dark for a long time. In the morning, before the castle woke, he went to find Ned. Ned, the confession he didn't make, 298 AC. Ned was in the Godswood. He was always in the Godswood at this hour. The pre-dawn, the grey light that was neither night nor morning. The specific northern hour where the weirwood's face looked most like a face rather than a carving. He prayed in the way Stark men prayed, which was silently and with the knees on cold stone, and the words kept entirely internal, because the gods of the north did not require speeches. Robert came through the gate. He had not cleaned up from the night before. He was still in the previous day's clothes, the fur thrown over them for the cold, and he had a cup of something that was probably wine, but might have been morning ale. He sat on the stone beside where Ned was kneeling, without waiting for an invitation. "The boy," Robert said. Ned kept his eyes on the heart tree. "Ned, he's my... Don't." Robert's voice. Not loud. The Robert voice that was used when Robert did not want to perform, but meant everything. "I need you to not say the next word. I need you to stop before the next word comes out, because once you say it, we're in a different situation than we're in now." He held the cup. "Last night at the feast. The boy. Who is he?" Ned was quiet. "I know what you're going to say," Robert said. "You've had 15 years to perfect what you were going to say if I ever asked. You know how to say it. You've said it to everyone else. And they believed it." He looked at the heart tree. The red leaves. The carved face. "I'm not everyone else, Ned. I know what Lyanna's eyes look like. I've been trying to forget what Lyanna's eyes looked like for 15 years, and I haven't managed it. And last night, I sat 20 feet from a boy who is wearing them." The godswood was quiet. The snow on the ground. The specific winter silence of a place that absorbed sound rather than reflecting it. "Tell me the truth," Robert said. "Not the court version. Not the story you told Kat or the lords or anyone else. Tell me." Ned turned from the heart tree. He looked at Robert. In 15 years of carrying the secret, he had built the specific architecture that secrets required. The consistent story, the deflections, the single answer to the single question that closed the subject every time. He had built it so well that the building had become him, had become part of who he was. The man who had one deliberate lie, and who had lived inside it so long that the lying and the living were indistinguishable. He looked at Robert's face. He saw what was there. Not rage. He had always feared the rage, the Robert rage, the warhammer in the human form, the thing that had killed Rhaegar Targaryen in a river. He had built the lie partly around the fear of what the rage would do to a child. But the face in the godswood was not rage. The face in the godswood was grief. 15-year grief. Compressed and preserved the way amber preserved things, exactly as it had been at the moment of loss, still carrying the features of the original rather than the erosion of time. "He is Lyanna's son," Ned said. Robert's hand tightened on the cup. "And his father?" "Robert, his father." Ned held his gaze. Rhaegar Targaryen, the godswood, the heart tree. The specific silence that arrived when the worst thing finally said aloud. Robert did not move for a long time. He was very still in the way that very large men were still when they were containing something that required containing. The stillness was its own violence, the applied will of a man who was not going to break the thing around him, because breaking it would mean the thing had won. "She chose him," Robert said. "Robert, don't." Flat. Final. "I need a moment." The moment lasted 5 minutes. Ned waited. The cold around them. The weirwood watching with its carved face that had watched everything and would watch this too. "The boy doesn't know," Robert said finally. "No. He thinks he's yours. He thinks he's my bastard. Yes. Bastard." Robert stood. He was large in the godswood. He had been large his entire life, filling rooms in a way that was not the ordinary filling of tall men. The physical presence of someone who burned brighter than the people around them. "Lyanna's son is living in your castle, eating at the side table." He's safe. He's eating at the side table because you told him he was your bastard, and he believes it. Robert's voice was doing something underneath the surface. He looks like her, Ned. He's got her eyes. He's carrying her eyes around in a castle and eating at the side table, and he doesn't know. That is what kept him alive, Ned said. Robert, if you had known, if anyone had known, if I had known. Robert looked at him. You think I would have killed him? I thought you might. I couldn't risk. He's Lyanna's child. Robert said it with the specific heavy weight of a man stating a fact that was also a feeling, and that he was not separating the two. He is the only piece of Lyanna that exists in the world. I would not have killed him. I don't know what I would have done. But not that. He walked to the gate, stopped. I want to meet him, Robert said. Not at the feast, not with the court watching. I want to meet him properly. Ned looked at his king. He thought, this is where it goes wrong. This is always where it goes wrong with Robert. The wanting, the enormous wanting, which is not cruel, but is not careful. Which does not account for consequence because Robert has never had to account for consequence. The wanting and the having are the same gesture for Robert. They have been his whole life. Let me arrange it, Ned said. Today, Robert said. He went back inside. Ned sat in the godswood. He looked at the heart tree. He thought. The lie held 15 years. It was never going to hold forever. He had known that. He had simply not asked himself what forever looked like when it ended. Jon and Robert. The yard. 298 SE. Ned arranged it in the training yard. Not because the training yard was the right place for what was about to happen, but because Robert had asked to see the boy properly. And the specific thing Robert meant by properly was always physical. He understood people through what their bodies did. He understood skill and courage, and the weight of a sword in a hand, and what the hand told him about the person holding it. Jon was practicing alone when they arrived. He did this often, the solo practice after the official training sessions, the specific Jon habit of working through things with a sword after the instruction was over, because the instruction was the structure, and the structure was not the thing. The thing was the hour after, when the yard was quiet. He stopped when he saw the king. He had met Robert at the feast, briefly, the royal introduction that the Lord's family received when the king arrived. The specific, formal moment that Jon had navigated with the awareness of his position in that moment, which was the bastard attending a court occasion, visible but not central. Robert had not particularly noticed him then. He appeared to be noticing him now. Robert looked at Jon the way Robert looked at everything, directly, with the full force of his attention, and without the social modulation that taught most people to look at things sideways. He looked at the boy with the dark hair and the grey eyes and the practice sword, and he just looked, the way you looked at something you had been searching for. Jon looked back. He was 14. He was not easily intimidated. Ned had not raised easily intimidated children. And the specific Jon temperament added an additional layer of composure to the general stark quality. But the king looking at him like that was its own kind of pressure. You practice alone, Robert said. After the sessions, yes. Your Grace. Show me something. Jon glanced at Ned. Ned gave nothing. Jon picked up the practice sword again. He went through a sequence, not the formal training sequences, the ones Roderick had been drilling into him since he was 7, but something looser. The specific Jon thing that Roderick always corrected, and that Jon kept doing because the correction was right about form and wrong about what the form was for. Robert watched. When Jon finished, Robert picked up the other practice sword without asking anyone's permission and stepped into the yard. Come at me, he said. Jon looked at him. Your Grace, I know I'm the king. Come at me. Ned said. Robert. Ned, let the boy come at me. Jon came at him. What happened next was not what Jon expected. He had been told about Robert's fighting, the stories of the rebellion, the trident, the warhammer. He had expected something that matched the stories. Raw force. The power of a large man who had never been stopped. What Robert brought to the yard was something older than the stories. The technique had rusted at the edges, and the body had thickened with years and wine. But underneath both was something that training alone didn't produce. The something was the specific quality of a man who had hit other people with weapons and survived it, who had processed violence through his body until the body knew it at a level below thinking. Jon lasted 40 seconds before Robert put him on his back. Not unkindly. Robert pulled it, the final move, the disarming deliberately controlled in a way that suggested he knew exactly how hard was necessary, and had not gone past it. Jon hit the dirt and lay there for a moment looking at the grey sky. Robert extended his hand. Jon took it. Was pulled up. "You're fast," Robert said. "Faster than I was at your age. You put me on the ground in 40 seconds. I've been doing this for 20 years. Come at me again." They sparred for an hour. Not the formal passing of time, the compressed, specific hour of two people who had found the language they communicated in, and who were communicating rapidly. Jon got better as the session progressed, adjusting to what Robert was doing in the specific Jon way, not anticipating, adapting, which was harder and rarer. Robert got slower as the session progressed, and did not care and kept going. When it was over, Robert was breathing hard and grinning in the way he grinned when something had been good. The full Robert grin that was one of the things that had made him the most beloved king in a generation. "What do you want to be?" Robert asked. The question landed unexpectedly. Jon wiped sweat off his face. "Your Grace, when you're grown, what do you want?" Jon looked at him. He had been asked this question before, but not by a king, and the answer he usually gave: the watch, because that was what bastards could aspire to in a clear-eyed accounting of the available options, felt wrong in this context. Not wrong in the dishonest sense. Wrong in the sense that the question was asking for something more honest than the strategic answer. "I don't know yet," Jon said. Robert looked at him. "That's the first honest thing anyone said to me since I left King's Landing," he said. He walked back toward the keep. Jon stood in the yard. He looked at Ned. Ned was watching where Robert had gone. His face was doing something that Jon had never seen on his father's face before, and that he did not have words for yet, but that he would later, when he was older, and had learned the vocabulary. Ned Stark's face had the expression of a man watching something he had been preventing arrive at last. "Father," Jon said. "Go clean up," Ned said. "You'll be at supper with the king's table tonight." Jon went. Ned stayed in the yard. Ned and Robert, the night before. 298 AC. They met in Ned's solar that night. No one else. The fire going, the wine on the table, the specific setting of two men who had been conducting their important conversations in private rooms since they were boys at the Eyrie, and who had never quite stopped. Robert said, "I want to take him south." Ned had been expecting something. He had been expecting several somethings since the gods would, but this was not any of the somethings he had prepared for, and he wasn't prepared. "No," he said. "He's wasted here." "He's, Robert. Listen to what you're saying. You want to take Lyanna's son to King's Landing and put him in the Red Keep with Cersei. As my ward, as a boy of promise that his lord's father..." He stopped. "He can be a ward of the crown. It's not unusual." "He knows who his father is," Ned said. "He thinks his father is me." "I know that. If you take him south, that changes. People will look at him in King's Landing the way you looked at him in the yard this morning. Someone will see what you saw. Then I deal with it when it comes." Robert held his gaze. "Ned, I spent 15 years in a city surrounded by people who are performing all day, every day. Cersei performs. The small council performs. Varys performs so well that none of us know what he's actually doing. And then I come north, and I watch a 14-year-old boy in a yard, and he stopped. He was looking for the word, and not quite finding it. Which was unusual for Robert, who was not normally slow with words. He's real. He does the thing I haven't seen in 15 years, which is be exactly who he is while he's being it. That's because he doesn't know what he is, Ned said. He thinks he's a bastard. He has the freedom of people who have nothing to protect, all the more reason to bring him somewhere it matters, all the more reason to let him stay somewhere it doesn't. Ned held his gaze. Robert, this is not a good idea. It's probably not, Robert agreed. I've had very few good ideas in my life. The good ideas I've had someone else had first, and I executed them. My own ideas tend to be large, and not entirely planned. He looked at the fire. I want to do this. He's my son. Ned said it the only way it could be said, simply, without inflection, the way you stated a thing that was true in every way that mattered. I have raised him for 14 years. He is my son. He is your sister's son, Robert said. Just as simply. He's the only piece of Lyanna that's left. I have spent 15 years trying not to think about that, and I can't spend the rest of my life trying not to think about it with him living 800 miles away in a castle where nobody knows what he is. Ned looked at the fire in his solar, the northern fire, birch and peat, the fire of a castle that was old and that had the specific smell of endurance. He had sat at this fire hundreds of times. He had made decisions at this fire that he was not proud of. He had made this decision at this fire 15 years ago, the decision to lie, to claim the child as his own, to carry the lie north and build a life inside it. He was tired. He was tired in the way that men were tired when they had been managing something enormous for a very long time, and the managing was almost over, and what came after the almost was either relief or disaster. He'll hate it there, Ned said. Maybe. King's Landing is everything he's not. It's everything nobody is until they learn to be it, Robert said. I wasn't built for King's Landing either. I learned. You learned badly. Robert almost smiled. I learned. The quality of the learning is a separate question. He held Ned's gaze. I'm not asking you for permission. I'm your king. I'm asking you because you're my oldest friend, and because your son loves you, and I don't want to. I don't want to do this the way I do things, when I don't think about them first. He paused. I'm thinking about it first. Ned looked at his king. He thought about the 14-year-old boy in the yard, about the grey eyes that were not his grey, that were a different grey that carried a different history, about the careful quiet of a boy who had spent his life learning to take up less space, to make his presence manageable, to exist at the side table rather than the main table, to be the bastard rather than the son. He thought, Robert is going to take him. The taking has already happened. The only question is whether it happens with my cooperation or without it. He thought, Lyanna, I'm sorry. I held the promise as long as I could. You tell him the truth, Ned said. Not about Rhaegar. Not yet. But you tell him he's not my bastard. You tell him what you know. I wasn't going to lie to him. You lie to everyone, constantly, Ned said, by omission, by misdirection, by simply being louder than the truth. I am asking you to not do that with this specific child. Robert held his gaze for a moment. All right, he said. And he comes back, if he asks to. If the court is, if he can't survive there, he comes back. He'll survive, Robert said. The Robert certainty, the specific quality of a man who had never doubted a decision after he'd made it. He's Lyanna's. She survived everything. She didn't, actually, Ned said. The room went quiet. Robert looked at the fire. No, he said. She didn't. He left. Ned sat at his fire. He sat there for a long time. Jon. What Ned told him. 298 AC. Ned told him the next morning. Not all of it. Not the whole architecture of the secret. Not the Tower of Joy and the dying woman and the 15-year promise. But the part that needed telling. That Jon was not Ned's bastard son. That his mother was Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister, who had died in the south. That the king knew this, and that the king wanted Jon to come to King's Landing. He told it in the Godswood, same place as always. The heart tree watching. Jon sat on the cold stone and listened and did not move. He was very still in the stark way. When Ned finished, Jon looked at the weirwood for a long time. "My mother was your sister," he said. "Yes." "I'm not your son. You are my son. You have been my son for 14 years. Whatever else is true, you are my son." Jon held the weirwood's gaze. Who was my father? The question that Ned had been building toward. That was always the next question, the one that followed the first, like a river following its bed. He had prepared for this question since the Godswood 15 years ago. He had prepared for it with the same answer he'd given Robert, and the answer was, not yet. "That's a conversation for later," Ned said. "When you're older. When you have the context to..." "You're sending me to King's Landing," Jon said. "You're sending me to the Red Keep. I'll be in the most political city in the world at 14 years old, and I don't have context for who I am." It was the most Jon had ever argued with him. It was also entirely correct. Ned sat with it. "Your father died in the rebellion," he said carefully. "He was not a bad man, though the war was fought over what he did. The full truth of him, what he was, and what his blood means for you, is something I will tell you. Not today. When you come back from King's Landing, if you want it. Is there something about my blood that puts me in danger?" Ned looked at his nephew, at the grey eyes that were not his grey but Lyanna's grey, and under that, the eyes of a man who had believed in prophecy and destiny, and who had died for it at a river crossing, and whose blood was now sitting in a Godswood asking the right question. "Yes," he said. Simply. Jon sat with that. The king knows. He knows about Lyanna. He doesn't know the rest. He held Jon's gaze. "While you're in King's Landing, while you're with Robert, the rest stays between us. Can you do that? Keep a secret about my own father?" "Yes." Jon was quiet for a moment. "You've been keeping it for 14 years, Jon said. "Yes." "And it nearly killed you." Ned was still. Jon stood. "I'll keep it," he said. "I don't know who he is yet. That makes it easier." He looked at Ned. Looked at him in the way he had looked at him his whole life. The way he had been looking at him since he was old enough to look at things with attention. "You should have told me sooner. I know. I needed to know sooner. I know that too." Jon went back to the castle to pack. Ned and Catelyn, the morning he left. 298 AC. Catelyn did not come to the yard. Ned had told her the previous night, not in the Godswood, in their chambers, with the fire low and the children asleep, and the specific privacy of a marriage that had been honest about everything except the one thing. He had told her about Lyanna, about Jon, about the promise and the lie. He had expected the specific Catelyn anger that arrived when Catelyn had been deceived, the controlled fury, the Tully precision directed at a wrong that was being named. He had expected it, and he had deserved it, and he had received something else. She had sat with it for a very long time. "I was cold to him," she finally said. "Yes, for 14 years. Because I believed he was, because I thought he was." She stopped. Started again, and all this time, he was Lyanna's. "Yes." She looked at the fire. "Lyanna is dead," she said. "She is. And he carries her. In this castle. The coldness was wrong. I knew it was wrong every time I did it, and I told myself it was appropriate, and it wasn't. It was just me being afraid of something that wasn't what I was afraid of." Ned held her gaze. "He doesn't blame you," he said. "I don't think he ever has." "He should." She held the gaze. "Children should be allowed to blame the people who are cold to them. It teaches them what they can expect from the world. The world hasn't taught him that lesson through you." He held the gaze. "It's taught him other ones." She looked at the fire. "Robert is taking him south," she said. Not a question. "In the morning." "Can you stop it?" "No." He held her gaze. "I'm not sure I should. Robert is. Robert will be something for him that I couldn't be." Something larger and louder, and wrong about most things. But wrong in the specific ways that are different from my wrong. And Jon needs more kinds of wrong than one man can give him. Catelyn looked at her husband. "You're letting him go," she said. "He's 16 in 2 years. He would go regardless." He held the gaze. "And the claim, the specific weight of what he carries. King's Landing is where the weight is relevant. The North is where the weight is hidden. Hidden things fester." She was quiet. "Will he be safe?" "Robert will keep him as safe as Robert keeps anything." "That's not reassuring." "No." He held her gaze. "He's not Lyanna. He doesn't take risks the way she did. He's more careful. He thinks before he goes." He looked at the fire. "He'll be careful. Whether careful is enough, I don't know. I've never known. That's the cost of having children who go into the world." She held his hand. They sat by the fire until the fire was embers and the morning was early enough to call itself morning. In the yard, before the procession formed, Jon came to find Ned. He was already in traveling clothes. Northern clothes, Ned noticed, rather than the warmer southern clothes the servants had laid out for him. The specific choice of a boy who was going south, but who wasn't going to perform the going. "I have 2 things to tell you," Jon said. "Tell them." "The first is, you should have told me earlier. I know why you didn't, and the why is right, but the earlier would have been better." He held Ned's gaze. "Not as an accusation, as information, so you can make different choices with the ones who come after." Ned held the gaze. "The second thing," Jon said. "Yes. Thank you." He held the gaze. "For carrying it. For 14 years, in every room, every time someone asked a question that pointed at it. For keeping me safe while you were carrying it." He held the gaze. "It cost you. I know it cost you. Thank you." Ned looked at his nephew. He said, "Your mother would have liked who you are." Jon held the gaze for a moment. He nodded. He went to his horse. He did not look back. Ned stood in the yard and watched the procession form, and watched it leave through the gate, and watched the gate close behind it. Catelyn was in the window above. He looked up at her. She looked down at him. They held the gaze across the yard, and the distance, and the 15 years, and the truth finally told, and the boy finally gone toward whatever he was going toward. Then she was gone from the window. Ned went to the Godswood. The road south. What Robert said. 298 AC. They rode south together, Jon and Robert, the king's massive retinue around them, the specific traveling machinery of a royal procession that was too large and too slow and too loud for the King's Road, and somewhere in the middle of it, a 14-year-old boy on a horse, who was managing the specific experience of leaving everything he'd ever known while the king rode beside him. Robert talked. This was something that Jon had not been prepared for. He had been prepared for the discomfort of the road and the cold strangeness of being removed from Winterfell, and the specific anxiety of not knowing who he was or what role he was supposed to play in this new world he was entering. He had not been prepared for the king to simply talk at him for 8 hours a day without visible fatigue. Robert talked about the rebellion, about the battles, not the strategy, the feel, the specific physical reality of combat as Robert had experienced it, which was not the songs and was not entirely the truth either, but was something in between. The truth as filtered through the ego of a man who had lived his greatest moments when he was young, and who was still working out how to be what he was after them. He talked about Lyanna. Not directly at first. Sideways, the way Robert talked about things that mattered, approaching obliquely, getting closer, circling. He talked about the tournament at Harrenhal, where Rhaegar had named Lyanna Queen of Love and Beauty, and the world had gone quiet for a moment, the way it went quiet when something was about to break. He talked about how beautiful she was, and said it the way you said things that had been true for so long they'd stopped being describable. Just the fact of it, the simple, enormous fact. She was stubborn, Robert said. On the third day, the northern forests giving way to the warmer south, the specific atmospheric change of coming below the neck. Everyone talks about how beautiful she was, and she was. She was absolutely. But she was the stubbornest person I ever knew. More stubborn than Ned, which is saying something. More stubborn than me, which is saying a great deal. Jon was listening. He had been listening to everything Robert said about his mother, and storing it with the specific concentrated attention of someone who was filling in a picture they had been given no colors for. She knew what she wanted, Robert continued, and she always wanted things I hadn't thought of yet. That was the thing about Lyanna. She was always a step ahead of where I was in the world, and I was always trying to catch up. Jon looked at the road. Did she know you loved her? Jon said. Robert was quiet for a moment. She knew I wanted her, he said. Whether she knew the difference between that and love, I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure I knew the difference at the time. He drank from a travel flask. Put it away. She'd have liked you, Robert said. She liked people who were honest. She couldn't stand performance. She'd have liked that you don't perform. He looked at Jon sideways. You don't, you know. Even in the yard, when you were nervous but you didn't perform, than not being nervous. That's rarer than people think. Jon rode without answering. He was thinking about his mother. About the word mother, which had always had an empty shape in him, a hollow where something was supposed to be that wasn't. He was filling it now with what Robert gave him, which was not the whole truth. He understood there was a whole truth that he wasn't getting, but was better than the nothing he'd had. Your Grace, Jon said. Robert. On the road. Robert. Why are you bringing me south? The question hadn't been asked yet. They were 4 days in, and it hadn't been asked, because Jon had been storing things until he had enough of them to ask the right questions. He had enough now. Robert looked at him. Because you're too interesting to stay in the north, he said. That's not an answer. No, Robert looked at the road ahead. The south coming toward them, the air warming by degrees. Because you're Lyanna's. And I've been failing her memory for 15 years by being exactly the kind of king I was always going to be, which is not a good one. And I thought that maybe being responsible for something she cared about might make me. He stopped. Might make me better at something she would have cared about. Jon looked at the road. That's a lot of weight for one person, he said. Yes, I might not help. You might not. Robert agreed. But you'll be interesting while you're failing to, which is more than most people manage. Jon almost smiled. Almost, don't smile, Robert said. It makes you look like her when you do. It makes me feel. He stopped. Drank again. It's fine. Just warn me. He rode ahead. Jon rode behind and thought about what he was riding toward and what he had left behind, and the specific dislocation of being told you were one person for 14 years, and then being told you were someone else, and then being put on a horse and taken south to a city that was the home of neither person. Ghost was in the wagon behind them. His direwolf, 3 months old, white and red-eyed, and completely out of place on the King's Road. Robert had been informed about the wolf and had said nothing at all, which was either acceptance or the deferral of a decision he hadn't made yet. Jon had brought Ghost, because Ghost was the thing from Winterfell that was most entirely his. The thing that had been his responsibility and his from the moment he'd found it, and the leaving would have broken something if he'd left it behind. Ghost rode in the wagon. Ghost did not like the wagon. Ghost's feelings about the wagon were communicated through the expression of a young direwolf who had decided that all boxes were personal offenses. Jon understood the feeling. King's Landing. Arrival, Cersei. 298 AC. King's Landing smelled like the sea, and something else underneath the sea. The specific smell of density, of too many people existing in too close proximity for too long. The smell of a city that had been building on top of itself for centuries, and that carried the accumulation. Jon had heard about King's Landing his whole life, in the way that people who grew up in cold places heard about warm ones through description, which never quite carried the temperature. The city was as described in the facts and not described at all in the experience. The noise was the part nobody mentioned. The noise was the thing that hit you first. A wave of it. 500,000 lives being lived simultaneously, with the volume of people who had stopped being surprised by each other, and had therefore stopped moderating their noise to account for anyone. Robert entered through the gate with the full procession, and the noise of the city changed register, the specific noise of a crowd becoming an audience, the shift that happened when the object of attention was identified. People shouted, not with joy exactly, with the specific ambivalent warmth that King's Landing had for Robert. He was not a good king. The city knew this, but he was their king in the specific sense that he was theirs. Familiar, the devil they knew and had domesticated. Jon rode behind the king. Nobody looked at Jon. This was the specific gift of riding with Robert, who was the largest and loudest thing in any room he entered. The city was looking at Robert. Jon was in Robert's wake, invisible in the shelter of it, able to look at the city rather than having the city look at him. He looked. The Red Keep appeared as they came through the city's levels, the castle on the hill, the Lannister seat dressed in Baratheon colors, the specific monument that power built when it wanted to communicate. This is permanent and you are not. It was bigger than Winterfell and colder in a different way. The cold of stone that had been cut rather than accumulated, the built cold rather than the geological. They passed through the gate. Cersei was in the yard. She had been told, obviously. You couldn't bring a royal procession into King's Landing without the Queen knowing. She had been told and she had prepared, and the preparation was the specific Cersei preparation that communicated through costume and posture, and the perfect control of a face that was never going to show what it was actually doing. She was in green. She was composed. She was wearing the Queen the way other people wore clothes. She looked at Robert. She looked at Jon. Jon felt it. The specific attention of a person who was dangerous and who had just identified something as a threat. Not the Robert attention, which was warm even when it was overwhelming. Cersei's attention was the cold assessment of a person cataloguing risk. He held her gaze. She held his. Robert introduced him. Cersei, this is Jon. He is the son of Lyanna Stark, my ward, and under my protection. He said it with the specific Robert delivery of information that was designed to be both accurate and not entirely the information you thought you were receiving. Accurate in every word and misleading in the combination. Cersei's face did not change. My lord, she said to Jon. My queen, Jon said. She turned to Robert. We should discuss the arrangements. Jon will have rooms in private. She did not look at Jon again. She walked toward the keep. Robert watched her go. He looked at Jon with the expression of a man who has just introduced two things that were going to have a problem, and who has accepted this in advance. The Queen is, he started. I know who the Queen is, Jon said. Cersei. He watched the door where she had gone. She's not fond of the idea, I gathered. She'll manage it. He said it with the specific Robert certainty that was sometimes accurate. Give her time. Jon looked at the Red Keep around him, at the walls, at the guards in their gold cloaks, at the specific architecture of a place that was designed to communicate power, and that communicated it effectively, which was to say that standing inside it made you very aware of how small you were. Where should I go? Jon said. Robert pointed at a servant. He'll take you to your rooms. He clapped Jon on the shoulder, the Robert clap, which was not calibrated and which rocked Jon sideways. Welcome to King's Landing. Try not to trust anyone. He went after Cersei. Jon followed the servant. Ghost padded behind him, the direwolf's white coat drawing looks from every guard and servant they passed. Cersei and Robert. What she said. 298 AC. She closed the door. He had been expecting this. He had been expecting this for 3 weeks. The entire road south. The specific Cersei door closing that was the prelude to a Cersei conversation that was being controlled rather than performed. The difference between Cersei performing anger and Cersei controlling it was audible. Lyanna Stark's bastard, she said. Her son. Her bastard. She held his gaze. The specific Cersei gaze when she was being very precise about something and needed him to receive the precision. You brought Lyanna Stark's bastard son into the Red Keep as your ward. You brought him here, after 15 years of her ghost being in this marriage, like a second person in the room. You brought her child here and put him in the room across the hall from Joffrey. He's not across the hall. Where is he? East Tower. Which corridor? The second? Third? He stopped. Cersei, he'll be here forever, Robert. You understand that? You don't take children in as wards and then send them back. He will live here. He will grow up in this castle. He will be present at every dinner and every court occasion and every... She stopped. Controlled. He is 14. He will be in the Red Keep until he is a grown man and he is a ward of the king and everything that means, in terms of status and proximity, and he's not a threat to you, Robert said. She looked at him, the Cersei look when she was hearing something she had heard before, and that was still wrong. He is Lyanna Stark's son, she said. You are in love with a dead woman. I have been living alongside that fact since the day of our wedding. I have managed it. I have managed it because the dead stay dead, and ghosts are manageable things. You have brought the ghost's child here, and given him rooms, and called him your ward. Do you understand what that says to every lord in this city? It says I honored an old friend's memory. It says that Ned Stark's bastard, who everyone assumes is also your bastard, because why else would you do this? Why else would you bring a bastard from the north to live in the Red Keep? It says you couldn't keep your hands off anyone for 15 years, which is true, but this specific instance is. He's not my bastard. Everyone will think he is. Let them think it, Robert's voice. The Robert impatience under the surface. The specific pressure that built when Robert felt he was being managed. Let them think what they want. I know what he is. You know what he is. That's enough. Cersei looked at him. What is he? She said. He's Lyanna's son. And his father. His father is dead. He held her gaze. The Robert gaze when he was holding a thing that he was not going to release. His father is dead, and that is all anyone needs to know. She held the gaze. She was calculating. He could see it. The rapid Cersei calculation that processed information the way she processed threats. Comprehensively, instantly, with the specific attention to implications that was her greatest skill and her constant burden. If anyone looks at him closely, she said, no one will. He has grey eyes, Robert. He has dark hair and grey eyes, and he looks exactly like... She stopped, changed what she was going to say. He looks like someone who is not from the north. He's northern on his mother's side. His mother's side is your ward's side, which is the wrong grey for Stark. There are people at this court who remember what Rhaegar Targaryen looked like. The room went very still. Robert's face changed. The specific Robert face when he was encountering something he had been avoiding thinking about, and that had arrived regardless. Nobody's going to... Varys, she said. Littlefinger. The Grand Maester. These are not stupid men. They look at what is in front of them, and they draw conclusions, and the conclusions are their leverage. She held his gaze. You have brought a problem into this castle, and called it a ward. Robert looked at the floor. I know, he said. Then why? Because he's hers. He looked up. Because she's been dead for 15 years, and I have nothing left of her, and he exists, and he's real, and I can't leave him in Winterfell eating at the side table. He held Cersei's gaze with the specific Robert honesty that arrived when the wine was absent, and the performance was too tired to maintain. I know it's a problem. I know it creates. I know. But I couldn't leave him there. Cersei held his gaze. She looked at her husband, at the man she had been managing and resenting and occasionally understanding for 15 years. At the man who had built his whole identity on a war fought for a woman he never had, and who had been trying to build the rest of his identity on the absence of her. "He'll need to be watched," she said finally. "He's a ward, not a prisoner. Everyone in this castle needs to be watched. That's what this castle is." She turned away. "Put the wolf somewhere that isn't my children's corridors?" She left. Robert stood in the room. He thought, she's afraid. He thought, she's right to be afraid. He thought, I'm going to need more wine. Cersei. What she decided, 298 AC. She came to Jaime 3 nights after Jon's arrival. The private chamber, the firelight, the specific brother-sister privacy that existed inside the Red Keep as its own territory, the territory neither of them named and both of them occupied. Jaime looked at her face when she came in and said, "The ward." "Lyanna Stark's son," she said. She sat. She held the wine she'd brought without drinking it. "Robert brought Lyanna Stark's son into the Red Keep and gave him rooms and is going to eat with him and hunt with him and call him his ward." She held the cup. "He looked at me in the yard as though he knew exactly who I was." "He's 14, Jaime said. "He's Ned Stark's ward, or his bastard, or Robert's bastard, or—" She stopped. Something about him is wrong. Not wrong like a threat. Wrong like... She held the cup. Wrong like he's not what he's supposed to be. Jaime held her gaze. He had the specific Jaime attention when he was being careful, the attention that existed under the performance of ease. "What do you want to do about it?" he said. "I want to know who he is." She held the cup. Varys knows. Varys always knows. But Varys will use it when it serves him, and not before. Pycelle. Pycelle is useful, but not for this kind of intelligence. He's too old and too slow. She held Jaime's gaze. "I want you to watch him. He's a 14-year-old ward. He's a 14-year-old ward who is going to be in my castle, and near my children, and in my court, and I want to know what he is before the court decides what it thinks he is." She held his gaze. "Will you watch him?" "I train with the ward rotation," Jaime said. "He'll come to the inner yard." "I know." "And if I watch him in the yard, tell me what you see." She held his gaze. "Not what you think I want to hear. What you actually see." Jaime held the gaze. "You're asking me to give you honest intelligence about a 14-year-old boy who may or may not be a threat?" "Yes, because you can't trust yourself to be objective about him." She held his gaze and did not answer. Jaime looked at the fire. "I'll watch," he said. He watched. What he saw over the following months was not what Cersei feared, and not what he expected, and was, upon reflection, the most interesting thing that had happened in the training yard in years. The boy was fast, and he was adaptive, and he was not performing anything in the yard, which was the rarest quality in the Red Keep, which was a place where everyone performed everything. He told Cersei, "He's honest." She held his gaze. "In the yard," Jaime said. "He makes mistakes, and he acknowledges them. He gets corrected, and he incorporates the correction. He doesn't argue about whether he was right. He finds out whether the correction was right. That's in the Red Keep. In 15 years, I haven't seen that. He's northern. He's something specific." He held her gaze. "He's not a threat in the way you mean threat. He's not plotting. He's not positioning." He paused. "He's learning. Everything. As fast as the castle can teach it. And when he's learned everything the castle can teach," Jaime held the gaze, "then he'll be the best educated person in it," he said. "And whatever he does with the education will depend entirely on what he decides to do with it." Cersei held the cup. "He's going to be a problem," she said. "He's going to be something," Jaime said. "Not necessarily a problem." She held the cup for a long time without drinking. "Watch him longer," she said. Jaime went back to the yard. Jon and Joffrey, the first encounter. 298 AC. Joffrey came to find him. Not the next day, the day after. Joffrey had apparently needed a day to determine his approach, which Jon would later understand was the Joffrey method, which was to identify the kind of thing something was before deciding how to be towards it. Jon was Northern Ward. Northern Wards were, in Joffrey's taxonomy, somewhere between curiosity and condescension as a default. He came to Jon's rooms with 2 Kingsguard at his back, and the specific presence of a boy who had been told since birth that rooms belonged to him by his arrival in them. Jon was sitting with a book. Ghost was on the floor, which Joffrey noticed immediately. "That's a wolf," Joffrey said. "He is." Jon looked up from the book. "He doesn't like loud noises." Joffrey considered this. He was 12. Jon was 14. The 2-year difference was the wrong direction for Joffrey, who was accustomed to being either the eldest or the most powerful in whatever room he occupied. He looked at Jon with the assessment of someone who was recalibrating. "Father says you're from the north," Joffrey said. "I am." "Father says you're interesting." "Your father is." Jon stopped, chose the end of the sentence. "Generous." "Father doesn't say things he doesn't believe." Joffrey said it with the specific mixture of possessiveness and pride that children had for their parents' qualities when the qualities were real. "He doesn't like most people. He likes me." "I know." Joffrey sat down. He did it without being invited, which was either the royal habit or the Joffrey habit, and they were interchangeable. "Why?" Jon looked at him. "Because I don't perform," Jon said. Joffrey's eyes narrowed slightly. "Processing. What's that mean?" "It means I say what I think. I don't change what I say based on who's listening. Everyone does that. At this court, yes." Jon held his gaze. "It's different where I'm from." Joffrey looked at Ghost. "Can I pet it?" "If he lets you." Jon held Joffrey's gaze. "He decides." This was a new concept for Joffrey, visibly. The concept that something in his proximity might have its own decision-making authority. He looked at Ghost with the specific evaluative attention of someone who had never had to evaluate whether a thing would permit him to touch it. He put out his hand. Ghost smelled it. Ghost did not move away. Joffrey touched the wolf's head, tentative, then less tentative. Ghost tolerated it with the specific direwolf expression of an animal that was making a decision and had not concluded it yet. "He's cold," Joffrey said. "He's northern." Joffrey withdrew his hand, sat back. "I'll show you the training yard tomorrow," he said. "The real one, not the one in the outer ward. The Kingsguard train in the inner yard." "All right," Jon said. "You have a sword?" "Yes." "Father says you're good." "Your father put me on my back in 40 seconds. He puts everyone on their back in 40 seconds. Joffrey looked at him with something that was the specific 12-year-old version of respect, not the performed version, the real one, which was reluctant and came out at unexpected angles. "He doesn't call everyone interesting afterward." He left. Jon looked at Ghost. Ghost looked at him. "Well," Jon said. Ghost put his head down on his paws. "Yes," Jon agreed. "We'll see." The first months. What the court made of him. The court decided he was Robert's bastard. Not by accusation. Nobody accused anyone of anything in King's Landing, because accusation required commitment, and commitment was the one thing the court almost universally avoided. By assumption. By the specific court mechanism of reading a situation and producing a conclusion that served the situation better than the truth did, and that was therefore more durable than the truth. The assumption was, Robert Baratheon had a bastard son somewhere in the north, which was entirely credible, which was in fact probably true regardless of whether Jon was specifically that bastard, and the bastard had been brought south as a ward in a moment of royal sentiment, which was also entirely credible. Jon heard the assumption from a servant in the first week. He said nothing to correct it. He had been told to keep the secret, and keeping it required, not correcting the assumption, and not correcting it meant allowing people to believe what they believed. He was getting his first lesson in King's Landing's specific epistemology, which was, the truth of a thing was less important than the story the court had decided about it. Varys found him in the library, third week. Jon had been spending time in the library because the library was quiet, and because it contained information, and because information was what you needed in a place you didn't understand. Varys appeared between shelves with the specific Varys appearance, which was no warning, no noise, simply present. Lord Jon, Varys said. Just Jon. He looked at the eunuch. He had been briefed on Varys by Robert briefly, with the specific Robert briefing that said, he knows everything, he's useful, don't trust him. Welcome to King's Landing. Jon, Varys repeated. He sat across from Jon with the delicate precision of a man who moved as though he were always in a space he didn't quite own. How are you finding the city? Loud. Yes. The acoustics are unfortunate. The King's City was not designed with contemplation in mind. He looked at the book in Jon's hands. Histories? House histories. I'm trying to learn the names. An excellent strategy. The names are the map. Once you have the names, you can navigate most of what happens here. He folded his hands. May I ask what Lord Stark told you about your time here? Jon looked at him. He told me to learn what I could, Jon said, and to trust my instincts about people. Wise counsel? Varys smiled the Varys smile, which was warm and empty and useful simultaneously. Your instincts about me would be, you're useful, and you know everything, and you serve what you call the realm, but the realm is what you decide it is. Jon held his gaze. Which means your loyalty is to your own judgment, rather than to any person. Which means you're not trustworthy in the specific sense of trusting. But you're predictable in the sense that you'll do what you think is best, even if it isn't what I want. Varys held the gaze for a moment. He looked at Jon with something that was genuinely unexpected in his expression, not warmth, not calculation, but the specific expression of a man who has been told an accurate thing, and is acknowledging its accuracy. 14 years old, he said. From the north, Jon said. People from the north have fewer social incentives to lie, so we get less practice performing and more practice seeing. A generous framing of northern bluntness. I'm trying to be diplomatic, Jon said. I hear it's important here. Varys almost smiled. I was coming to offer you information, he said. Freely given, because free information is the best kind. It creates goodwill without the appearance of debt. The information is, your direwolf is causing more commentary than you are. The court is uncertain whether to be frightened of it. I would suggest making that uncertainty productive. How? By being the person who controls the uncertain thing. He stood. Good afternoon, Jon. He left. Jon looked at the book. He thought, every conversation in this city is also a negotiation. He thought, I'm going to need better instincts than I brought from Winterfell. He thought, I'd better start building them quickly. Littlefinger was next. He came to a feast in the 3rd month and sat near Jon in the way that Littlefinger sat near people, casually, as though by accident, the specific Baelish method of reducing distance without appearing to choose the proximity. You've been speaking with Lord Varys, Littlefinger said. He speaks with everyone, Jon said. He does. He particularly speaks with new arrivals. What did he offer you? Information about my wolf. Littlefinger smiled the Littlefinger smile, which was warmer than Varys's and less trustworthy for being warmer. He would start with the wolf. The wolf is unthreatening. Information about the wolf is the gift you give before the gift you mean. He looked at Jon. What are your plans for your time here? To learn. To learn what? Everything available. Jon held his gaze. What are your plans for my time here? Littlefinger held the gaze and his smile shifted, fractionally, the specific Littlefinger shift when he was recalibrating someone. To be useful, as I am, to everyone. To everyone simultaneously, Jon said, which means to no one specifically. You've been talking to Lord Varys too recently, Littlefinger said. I've been watching the room, Jon said. I do that. I'm told it's a northern thing. He went back to his food. Littlefinger watched him for a moment, then he moved away to more comfortable conversations. The training yard. Jon and Jaime. 298, 299, AC. Jaime Lannister found him in the inner training yard. Not by accident, Joffrey had led Jon there, as promised, and the Kingsguard's yard was where Jaime spent his mornings. And the mornings of a Kingsguard Lord Commander, who was also the most celebrated swordsman in the realm, were spent in the specific way that you spent mornings when sword excellence was both your identity and your profession. Maintaining it. Jaime looked at Jon the way he looked at everyone in the yard, which was as a potential opponent until proven otherwise. He was in partial training armor, practice sword in hand, and he had the specific physical presence of a man for whom combat was not a skill, but a language. The Northern Ward, Jaime said. Sir Jaime, Jon said. Robert says you're fast. Robert put me on my back in 40 seconds. Robert is very large and has been hitting things with swords for 20 years. Being put on your back by Robert in 40 seconds is better than most people manage. He looked at Jon. Show me. Jon looked at Joffrey. Go ahead, Joffrey said. With the specific Joffrey investment in watching people prove themselves, that was the closest thing to genuine enthusiasm he showed. Jon picked up a practice sword. What happened in the yard over the following months was, in retrospect, the thing that changed the specific shape of Jon's time in King's Landing. Jaime did not take Jon as a student out of sentiment or duty. Jaime took Jon as a project because Jon was interesting and Jaime was bored, in the specific way that supremely talented people were bored when nobody around them was capable of challenging them. Jon was not capable of challenging Jaime, but he was capable of being the kind of student that made teaching interesting, which was, he learned faster than expected, he made mistakes only once, and when he was corrected, he didn't argue with the correction, but immediately incorporated it, and then argued with the underlying principle if the underlying principle seemed wrong. Jaime found this infuriating and excellent simultaneously. You're doing the thing again, Jaime said, in the 4th month. They had been working on a specific defensive form that Jaime had developed over years, and that Jon had absorbed and then modified in a way that was technically wrong and actually more effective. The thing, Jon said. The thing where you learn what I teach you and then decide you know better. I don't know better. I know differently. Jon held the practice sword. Your form is designed for your body. My body is different. Your body is smaller than mine. Yes, which means the pivot you're using requires more energy than I have. The modification costs less and produces a similar result. He demonstrated. Not better. Adapted. Jaime watched. He said, "Where did you get that?" I thought of it. You thought of it. On the road. I had a lot of time to think about what you'd been teaching me. Jaime looked at the practice sword. You think about sword technique on the road. I think about everything on the road. Jon held the gaze. I thought about your technique. I thought about how to adapt it. I thought about the court. I thought about what everyone I've met here actually wants versus what they say they want. He held Jaime's gaze. I think about things. What do you think about me? Jaime said. What I want versus what I say. Jon held the gaze for a moment. I think you want to be known, Jon said. Not famous. You're already famous. Known, there's a difference. Famous means people have a story about you. Known means someone sees the actual thing. He held the gaze. The Kingslayer story is not the actual thing. Jaime was very still. You've been here 4 months, Jaime said. Yes, and you think you know. I think I see. Whether that's knowing is a different question. Jon held the practice sword. I could be wrong. I usually build in the possibility that I'm wrong. Jaime looked at him for a long time. Hit me, he said. Not a request. An invitation. The specific Jaime invitation to a student who had just said something that deserved testing. They sparred. Jon lasted 6 minutes this time. When Jaime put him on his back, he helped him up and held his arm for a moment longer than necessary. "You're not wrong," Jaime said, and walked away. Jon stood in the yard. He thought, "I'm starting to understand this city." Forcan Ghost. The court's education. Ghost was 3 months old when he arrived at King's Landing. By the time Jon had been at court for a year, Ghost was large enough to be a serious concern to the people who passed him in the corridors. By 2 years, he was full-grown and enormous, and the specific combination of white fur and red eyes and absolute silence that he brought to every space he occupied had become a fixture of the Red Keep in the way that very strange things became fixtures when they persisted, by being present long enough that the absence would be stranger than the presence. People told stories about the wolf. The stories were in the specific category of stories that the court told about things it didn't understand, partly true, substantially embellished, and communicating through the embellishment something that the teller felt to be essential, even if the facts didn't support it. The story the stable boys told was that Ghost had once been seen standing over a man who had been following Jon through the lower corridors, and that the man had not followed Jon again. The man in question, when asked, said he had simply changed his route, but the story preferred the wolf's role. The story the servants told was that Ghost could tell when someone was lying. This was not true in any literal sense, but it was true in the functional sense, which was that Jon read people accurately, and Ghost was beside Jon when Jon was reading people. And the combination produced the impression that the wolf was the instrument. The story the Kingsguard told was the most specific and the most accurate, that Ghost had come to the training yard during a session where Sir Meryn Trant had been instructing Jon in a drill that was pointlessly injurious. The specific Meryn Trant approach to instruction, which was aggressive in ways that were designed to establish dominance rather than teach, and Ghost had sat at the yard's edge and watched Meryn Trant with the specific wolf attention that communicated, "I see what you are doing, and I am deciding whether it requires a response." Meryn Trant had changed his approach, not immediately, over the following sessions. The approach had shifted in ways that were difficult to attribute to any specific cause, but that correlated precisely with the presence of the direwolf and the direwolf's attention. Jaime had noticed this. He had come to Jon one evening and said, "Your wolf is training my colleague." "Ghost trains himself," Jon said. "Ghost is conducting an extended correction of Meryn Trant's pedagogy. Ghost is sitting in the yard. Ghost is sitting in the yard, and Meryn Trant is becoming a better instructor." Jaime held his gaze. "I'm not complaining. I'm observing." Jon looked at Ghost. Ghost looked back with the specific expression of an animal who had no comment to make. "He did the same thing to the steward, who was shortchanging the kitchen stores," Jon said. "Sat outside the stores for a week. The shortchanging stopped. Your wolf is solving the Red Keep's corruption through sustained silent observation." "My wolf is a wolf," Jon said. "The people around him are drawing their own conclusions." "The people around him are afraid of him," Jaime said. "And fear is the most efficient governor of human behavior." He looked at Ghost. "Where did you get him?" "He was the last of the litter," Jon said. "The smallest. He was apart from the others. I brought him, because he seemed like the one who wouldn't survive without..." He stopped. He was doing the thing where he caught himself in an explanation that was also about himself, and decided not to continue the explanation out loud. Jaime held the gaze. "The one who wouldn't survive without help," Jaime finished. "The one who was on his own," Jon said. Jaime looked at the wolf. "The names," he said. "Your brothers and sisters at Winterfell. They're wolves. Ghost is the odd one. The different one. The white one." "He's the one I brought," Jon said. Jaime held the gaze. "Sometimes the right companion is the one that doesn't fit anywhere else either," he said. Jon held the gaze. "Yes," he said. Jaime went back to the yard. Jon looked at Ghost. Ghost put his head on his paw. Don't read into it, Jon said. Ghost declined to comment. Cersei's long campaign, 298-299 AC. Cersei did not move against Jon directly. She was too intelligent for direct moves. Direct moves left evidence, and evidence was the specific thing that Cersei managed around rather than toward. Because evidence was the thing that got turned against you when the tide changed. She had been operating in the Red Keep for 15 years, and the Red Keep had taught her one thing above all others: the tides always changed. She moved laterally. She moved through the small council, where she had specific influence with Pycelle, whose loyalty was purchased and maintained through the long-term investment of being the person who called on him when he needed calling on. She used Pycelle to raise concerns about the ward's accommodations, not the ward himself, the wolf. The wolf in the Red Keep created concerns about the safety of the royal children. The wolf should be kennelled in the outer yard. Jon moved Ghost to the outer yard. Cersei moved through the servants, where her reach was comprehensive in the way that Queen's reaches were comprehensive. Not through orders, but through the specific atmosphere she created around herself that the servants navigated by anticipating what she wanted rather than waiting to be told. The servants were careful around Jon, not hostile. Careful. The specific careful that meant, we've been told to notice things. Jon noticed that the servants noticed. He adjusted accordingly. He was careful about what he said and where he said it. He was careful about which servants he spoke with and what he said to them. He was not unfriendly. Unfriendly would have been a pattern that communicated fear. But he was measured. Cersei moved through Joffrey. This was the most complex operation. Joffrey had developed a genuine interest in Jon that was the most honest version of Joffrey's limited capacity for genuine things. He liked Jon because Jon didn't perform, and the not performing was the specific thing that the court never gave Joffrey. He went to Jon's rooms. He went to the training yard when Jon was there. He said things to Jon that he didn't say to anyone else, which were often the things that were true for Joffrey, and that the performance didn't allow. Cersei watched this, and she felt the specific Cersei feeling about it, which was danger. Not because Jon was bad for Joffrey, she could see that the relationship was producing the best version of Joffrey that currently existed. Because Jon was a variable she didn't control. She came to Joffrey's chambers one evening. "Tell me about Jon Snow," she said. Joffrey looked up from a document he was studying. He had begun studying the court's structure, partly from natural interest, and partly from Jon's evident interest in the same material. The specific Joffrey competitiveness that worked on this problem by doing what Jon did. "What about him? What do you talk about?" "Things." He looked at her. The Joffrey look when he was deciding how much to give. Training, court politics, history. He reads a lot. He knows more history than Pycelle. History of what, specifically? The Targaryen dynasty. The rebellion. He looked at her. Why? "I'm interested in what interests the ward." "He's interested in everything." Joffrey said it with the specific Joffrey tone that had both pride and resentment in it. Pride because he was friends with someone interesting. Resentment because the interesting person was not him. He reads because he says you can't understand the present without the past. That sounds like Ned Stark's counsel. Maybe. Joffrey returned to his document. He thinks differently from everyone else here. He says things that nobody else says. Such as, he said the Kingsguard's purpose isn't to protect the king. Joffrey looked up. He said the Kingsguard exists to demonstrate that the king has the loyalty of the best fighters in the realm. The protection is secondary. The symbol is primary. He held her gaze. He said the symbol is only as strong as the loyalty is real. Which means a Kingsguard that stays when it isn't forced to is worth more than one that stays because of the oath. Cersei held her son's gaze. He said that. He said it's the same as everything else in King's Landing. The symbol says one thing. The reality says another. If you can't tell the difference, the city runs you. He looked at her. He was talking about court. I thought about it afterward, and I thought it was also about... He stopped. About what? About us. About our family. He held her gaze. About whether the things we present are the things we are. Cersei held her composure. What Jon Snow was doing to her son was making her son think. This was more dangerous than she had anticipated. Jon and Robert. What their relationship became. Robert summoned him for hunting 3 times. The hunting trips were Robert's specific domain, the thing that was entirely his, outside the court, outside the performance of kingship, outside everything that Robert found crushing about the throne. He took very specific people on the hunting trips, which was to say he took people he actually liked, rather than people the situation required. Jon came on the first one with the specific awareness that being included was significant, and with the additional awareness that he didn't know what to do with significance yet. The forest outside King's Landing was different from northern forests. Warmer, denser, the trees closer together with the specific pressing quality of growth that was trying to crowd everything out. Robert moved through it like a man coming home. The woods were where Robert was most himself. The King's Road and the hall stripped away, and what was left was the man before the crown. "You're not saying anything," Robert said. On horseback, through the trees. "I'm watching." "What are you watching?" "You." Jon held the gaze. "You're different here." "Yes." "Why is the king different here than he is in the keep?" Robert looked at the trees. "Because the keep is where I am king, and the forest is where I am Robert." He held the gaze. At some point, those 2 things became different enough that being in one of them means not being in the other. When did that happen? Gradually, after the rebellion. He was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to win the throne. I won it. I did not particularly want what winning it produced, which was the throne, the actual running of it, the sitting in it." He paused. "The problem with wanting something for 15 years and then getting it is that you spent 15 years building the wanting and nothing building the having. You arrive at the having without the skill set." "That's honest," Jon said. "I'm honest when I'm sober in forest." He looked at Jon sideways. "I'm honest about very little else, and I'd prefer you kept this specific forest honesty to yourself." "I will." "Good." He spurred his horse. "Now stop being interesting and help me find a boar." On the 3rd hunt, Robert told him about Lyanna, the real version. Not the one he'd given on the road south, the official version, the Baratheon version, the version where Lyanna was the beautiful girl who was taken and for whom the war was fought. The real one, the one where she was a person rather than a symbol. He told Jon about the tournament at Harrenhal and the way she had laughed when Rhaegar had named her. Not the song's version of the laugh, the actual sound of it, the one he'd heard with his own ears, which was not the delicate musical laugh of high ladies, but the full, genuine laugh of a woman who was surprised by something and didn't perform the surprise. He told Jon about the blue roses. He told Jon about the spring and the morning they'd ridden, and she'd gone ahead of him, because she could, and because making Robert try to keep up was something she found entertaining, and the way the sun had come through the trees. Jon listened. He listened with the concentrated attention of someone who was receiving something that they had been waiting for, without knowing they were waiting. His mother. The person who had been an absence his whole life becoming a presence. When Robert finished, they rode in silence for a while. "She sounds like someone who knew what she wanted," Jon said. "She always knew. From the time she was young. She knew what she wanted, and she went for it, and she didn't consider the cost carefully enough." He looked at the trees. "She paid for it." "I'm the cost," Jon said. Robert looked at him. No, you're what she left." He held his gaze. "The cost was her. You're the leaving." Jon held the quiet. "Tell me about my father," Jon said. Robert's jaw. "Ned said he'd tell you." "Ned is 800 miles away." He held the gaze. "I've been in King's Landing for 8 months. I've been reading the histories. I know what the histories say about the man who wrote himself off as a villain so that the rebellion could have a story." He held the gaze. "I know what the histories say. I want to know what you know." Robert rode. He rode for a while without speaking. He was, He stopped, started. He was everything I wasn't. Beautiful, clever, thoughtful. The kind of man who read poetry and wrote it and believed the words meant something. He looked at the trees. I hated him. I hated him for everything I thought he'd taken, and I killed him for it, and I built a dynasty on the killing. He held the reins. He believed in something I didn't understand. Some prophecy. Something about the world needing a specific person for a specific reason. He was the kind of man who could believe in that completely. He looked at Jon. You have his eyes. The grey that he got from his mother. I didn't know that's what I was seeing in Winterfell. I know it now. Jon was very still. What does that mean for me? He said. It means you're Stark and Targaryen, and you're sitting in King's Landing as my ward, with a direwolf in the outer yard, and the most dangerous court in the world around you. He held the gaze. It means your father's blood carries weight that I'd prefer not to think about too carefully. The old Targaryen names, the prophecies, the dragon that was supposed to come. He stopped. Don't think about it yet. You're 14. Or 15. You're 15 now. 15. 15. Don't think about the prophecy. Think about the training yard and the library and what Jaime Lannister can still teach you. He looked at Jon. Think about being 15. The rest will arrive without your help. The rest worries you, Jon said. Everything worries me, Robert said. That's what happens when you're king and you're sober and you're in a forest. Things worry you. He pushed his horse into a canter. Come on, the boar won't find itself. Jon followed. He thought about his father. He thought about the man who had believed in prophecy and who had died at a river crossing at 24, and who had apparently left his eyes in the face of a boy who was now riding through a southern forest, thinking about what it meant to be the thing you were. He didn't have an answer. He had a direction. The direction was, learn more. Robert, what he was becoming. 299 AC. In the second year, Robert started drinking less. Not dramatically. Not the sudden conversion of a man who had found religion or purpose, or the specific catalyst that produced visible transformation. The way things changed in Robert, which was, gradually, without announcement, through the accumulation of days that were slightly different from the days before them. He still drank. He would always drink. But the specific relationship between the king and the wine shifted in the specific year that he had a ward who would sit across from him in the hunting room and ask direct questions and receive direct answers. And the asking and the answering required a level of sobriety that the hunting room wine made difficult. Ned noticed it in a letter. Varys noticed it in the small council. Cersei noticed it in the bedroom, which she reported to no one because the change in the bedroom was something she had not expected and that she didn't know what to do with. Joffrey noticed it in the yard. Robert came to the inner yard more often in the second year. Not to train. Robert was past the age of serious training, and he knew it. To watch. To watch Jon and Jaime working through forms. To watch the specific interaction that had been producing results for 8 months, and that he had started attending as a regular audience. He brought a cup to the yard. He held the cup without drinking most of it. He watched. After one session, Joffrey sat beside him on the bench at the yard's edge. Father and son. The bench. The yard. The normal version of the scene. The one that was available in most castle yards, and that was not the version that existed in the Red Keep. He's getting better, Joffrey said. About Jon. He's getting better, Robert agreed. He works at it. He works at everything. Joffrey was quiet for a moment. Is that what you wanted? He said. When you brought him here. For him to work at everything. Robert looked at his son. Joffrey's face. The face that was Lannister and not Baratheon, and that Robert had been looking at for 12 years, and that he had never looked at clearly enough to see what it actually said. The specific Lannister gold of the hair. The Lannister green of the eyes. The face that was not his face, and that he had never permitted himself to look at long enough to register that it was not his face. He held his cup. "I brought him here because I needed to," Robert said. "I couldn't leave him in the north." He held the gaze. "Whether that's what I wanted, wanting and needing are different things for me. I wanted a lot of things, and most of them made me worse. This one made me..." He stopped. "This one made me better than I would have been. Which is not a thing I say about many choices I've made." Joffrey held the gaze. "He's good for you," Joffrey said. "He's good for everyone around him." Robert held the cup. "That's a thing you could learn from. Being good for the people around you. Not because it benefits you, because you decide it's worth doing." Joffrey looked at the yard. He was 12. He was the specific 12 of a boy who was being told something that was landing differently than it would have landed a year ago, which meant a year of different days had built a different receiver. "I'm trying," he said. "I know," Robert said. The yard. The afternoon. The northern ward finishing a form, and Jaime making a correction and the form being done again. Robert drank the cup. He didn't pour another. The truth. How it began to surface. 300 AC. Varys knew first. Or rather, Varys had always known. This was the nature of Varys, which was that he catalogued the world's information as a professional function, and had catalogued Jon's information at some point before Jon arrived, and had sat on the catalogued version while watching the boy navigate the court and waiting for the correct moment to make use of it. The correct moment arrived when Jon was 16. Varys came to his rooms in the evening, the rooms that had been Jon's for 2 years now, and that had become, in the way that spaces become yours when you live in them long enough, genuinely his. The books on the shelves were his. The specific arrangement of his things was his. Ghost on the floor was definitely his. The direwolf now full-grown and enormous, and serving as the most visible indication that there was something different about the ward in the East Tower. "I know who your father was," Varys said. Jon looked up from the letter he was writing to Ned. He held Varys's gaze. "You've known for a while," Jon said. "I've known since before you arrived." Varys sat. "I know most things. The question is what to do with knowing them." He looked at Ghost. "The wolf is useful. The wolf communicates. There is something here that is not what it appears to be. It keeps people at the right distance without you having to keep them there yourself." "What do you want?" Jon said. "I want what I always want," Varys said, "which is the realm to be stable and governed by competent people. In that framing, your existence is significant." He held the gaze. "The last Targaryen heir is living in the Red Keep as a ward of the man who overthrew the Targaryen dynasty, training with the Kingsguard, learning court politics, forming a genuine relationship with the Crown Prince. This is either the most dangerous situation imaginable, or the most interesting one. Or both. Almost certainly both." He folded his hands. "I'm going to be honest with you, which I rarely am, because honesty with you is more useful than the alternatives. Go ahead." "The succession is going to be a problem. Joffrey is not unsuitable. He is better than he would have been without you, which is the specific gift you've given him without intending to. But he is going to be tested. The realm is going to produce tests for whoever sits the throne in the next 10 years that will require more than he currently has." He held the gaze. "Your existence is known by me, by the king, by the queen who knows more than she admits, by Littlefinger, who does not know specifics but suspects general shapes, and by Ned Stark, who has been carrying it for 16 years. He paused. "It will not remain known only by this group. And when it becomes more widely known, you will need to have decided what you are before other people decide it for you." He held the gaze. "That is what I wanted to tell you. Not to act. Not yet. To decide." He stood. "One more thing," he said. "The Queen is preparing something. I don't know specifically what. I know generally that she has been moving pieces for several months toward a purpose that involves your position here becoming more uncomfortable than it is. She wants me gone. She wants to control what you represent. If she can't control it, she wants it gone." He looked at Ghost. "Keep the wolf close." He left. Jon sat with the letter to Ned half written on the table. He wrote a new letter. He wrote, "I need you to come to King's Landing. The time for the rest of the truth has arrived." He sent it. He waited. The Lineage Book. What Jon found. 299, 300 AC. He found the book in the library in his second year. Not the Lineage Book itself, a reference to it in a maester's correspondence that had been misfiled in the wrong section, and that Jon found because Jon read the library systematically, rather than selectively, starting at one end and working toward the other, which was not how most people read libraries, but was how Jon read most things. The correspondence mentioned the book. The correspondence was between Grand Maester Pycelle and a maester at the Citadel, discussing bloodlines, and the discussion referenced the Baratheon lineage book in passing, the specific book that tracked the characteristics of the bloodline over generations, which any thorough master would maintain for any ruling family. Jon found the reference at midnight. He sat with it. The Baratheon lineage book tracked hair and eye color across generations. The Baratheon bloodline ran to black hair and blue eyes, the specific coloring of Storm Country people who'd been building in the Stormlands since before the Targaryens came to Westeros. The coloring was consistent and dominant, and had been consistent and dominant for generations. Joffrey had blonde hair. Jon sat with this. He thought Jon Arryn had been investigating something before he died. He thought the death of the Hand had been the thing that brought Robert North to Winterfell. He thought Jon Arryn had been reading the same book. He thought the thing that Ned had been protecting, the thing about his blood, the Targaryen blood, the specific weight of it that Robert had told him was there, was not the only secret in the Red Keep. There was a Lannister secret sitting alongside it. A secret about whose children were whose, and whose bloodline ran true, and whose didn't. He thought, I'm in a castle with two hidden truths, and I'm attached to both of them. He went to Varys the next morning. The lineage book, Jon said. Varys held his gaze. Jon Arryn was reading it, Jon said. Before he died. Yes. The Baratheon coloring is black hair and blue eyes. Joffrey is blonde. Tommen is blonde. Myrcella is blonde. Yes. The Queen's family runs blonde. The Queen's brother. He held Varys's gaze. The Queen's brother is blonde. Varys said nothing. The Queen's children look like the Queen's brother, Jon said. Not like the king. Varys folded his hands. You've been in this castle for 1 year and 4 months, he said. You found it in 1 year and 4 months. Jon Arryn found it faster, and he died for it, Jon said. I'm asking what you did with it when you found it. I filed it, Varys said, under information that would destroy the realm if used incorrectly, and that requires careful management. It's going to surface, Jon said. Whether I surface it, or someone else does. Littlefinger knows I can see it in the way he manages his proximity to the Queen. He knows the Queen's position is fragile, and he's leveraging the fragility without naming it. Yes? If Littlefinger uses it before we manage it, the realm destabilizes. The king is enraged or broken. The succession collapses. The people who want chaos have their chaos. Varys held the gaze, which is why I have been managing it carefully. What's the management? Patience. The management is patience. Waiting for the correct moment to either expose it in a controlled way or neutralize the exposure risk entirely. He held the gaze. Your arrival was relevant to that calculation. How? Because you are the Targaryen heir. Because the combination of your claim and the Queen's secret is, the two things together are the most significant political information in the realm. Separately, they can be managed. Together, They produce the specific condition of a court that cannot sustain its current arrangement and must change. He held the gaze. What happens when the arrangement changes depends entirely on what has been built to replace it. Joffrey, Jon said, if the truth comes out, and Joffrey is not Robert's son, Joffrey's claim fails, and the throne passes to Stannis Baratheon, who is Robert's next of kin in the legitimate male line. He held the gaze. Unless you have a different view of the succession. Jon held the gaze. He sat with the full weight of it. He was 15 years old. He was sitting in the Red Keep's library with the Master of Whispers across from him, and the combined weight of two of the most significant secrets in the Seven Kingdoms pressing on the conversation. This is what Varys means by managing for the realm, Jon said. Yes, you've been managing for years. Since before you arrived. Why tell me now? Because you found the book reference. He held the gaze. Because you were going to find it regardless, and I would rather you find it through me than through Littlefinger, who would use it differently. He held the gaze. And because the time for patience may be running short. The Queen knows something about your presence here is wrong, and she is moving. Littlefinger knows the Queen is moving and he's positioning to benefit from whatever the movement produces. The specific management window is closing. Jon held the gaze. I need to write to Ned, he said. Yes, Varys said. You do. Ned comes south. 300 Kiri. Ned arrived in King's Landing on a Thursday. He came as the lord who had been summoned by his king. The formal visit that Robert could require, and that Ned could not refuse. The specific mechanism of feudal obligation that was the only mechanism Ned would have responded to immediately. Jon had been careful to frame the letter through Robert rather than himself. He had told Robert that Ned needed to come, and Robert had issued the summons, and Ned had come. Jon met him in the courtyard. He had not seen Ned in 2 years. The Ned who arrived was the Ned he remembered. The grey, the controlled face, the quality of endurance that Ned had instead of happiness, but with an additional element. Worry. Ned came into the courtyard with the worry visible in a way that Ned usually didn't allow things to be visible. They embraced. The northern embrace. Brief. Complete. You sent for me, Ned said. Yes. Varys? Varys, Jon confirmed. He knows. He's been sitting on it since before I arrived. He came to tell me he knew, which means whatever he's planning with it, he's planning on my side. Varys doesn't plan on sides, Ned said. Varys plans on the realm. I know. He told me. Jon held his gaze. I need you to tell me the rest. Ned looked at him. He looked at Jon, at the boy who had been 14 when he'd left Winterfell, and who was 16 now, and who had spent 2 years in King's Landing, becoming something that the North would not have produced. Not worse. Different. The court had layered things over the Jon that Ned had raised, refinements, but the underneath was still the same underneath. Here, Ned said, my rooms. Tonight. Robert knows I've sent for you. Doesn't know specifically why. Jon held his gaze. He might need to know eventually, but I need to know first. My father is dead. I know that. I know the war was fought over what he did. I need to know the rest, the prophecy, the marriage, the specific weight of the blood that I'm carrying in a city where the weight is going to matter very soon. Ned looked at the Red Keep around them. He thought, 2 years in King's Landing, and the boy had developed the specific vocabulary of the place, the weight, the blood, the matter very soon. Ned had always been frightened for Jon in abstract. He was frightened for him now in specific. Tonight, Ned said, I'll tell you everything. The full truth. 300 Asieg. Ned told it from the beginning. Not from Jon's birth. From before. From the tournament at Harrenhal. From the Blue Roses. From the first understanding among the people who were paying attention that something was happening between the prince and the wolf maid. From the specific understanding, after Lyanna disappeared, of what the disappearance meant. He told Jon about the Tower of Joy, about the three Kingsguard, Sir Arthur Dayne, Sir Oswell Went, Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, and what their presence there meant, because Kingsguard guarded the royal family, and their presence at the tower was the first proof. He told Jon about the fight, about what was inside. He told Jon about the birth and the dying and the promise. He told Jon about the marriage, that Rhaegar had married Lyanna in a ceremony in Dorne before the birth, with a septon and witnesses, that the marriage was real and legitimate under the faith's laws, and that it meant Jon was not a bastard, but the true-born son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. He told Jon that made him the heir of the Targaryen dynasty, ahead of even Daenerys, who was Aerys's daughter, because Rhaegar was Aerys's eldest son, and under the laws of succession, Rhaegar's heirs came before Aerys's other children. Jon stood ahead of Daenerys, not because of male or female line, but because Rhaegar had seniority, and seniority passed down. Jon sat with all of this. The candles in his rooms were low by the time Ned finished. The fire had burned down without anyone adding to it. Jon was looking at the window, not at anything specific, the dark of the window, the light of the city below, the specific luminescence of King's Landing at night, which was different from Winterfell at night, because King's Landing didn't go dark the way northern places went dark. It maintained a kind of glow. The prince who was promised, Jon said. That's what my father believed I was. It's what he believed, yes. Do you believe it? Ned was quiet for a moment. I believe you are Lyanna's son, Ned said. I believe you are Rhaegar's son. I believe the blood you carry is real, and that what it means, what you are supposed to do with it, that I don't know. I'm a man of the North. I believe in what I can see. What can you see? I can see that you're in the right place by accident, and possibly by design, depending on how much credence you give. The idea that certain people are in certain places for certain reasons. He held Jon's gaze. I can see that you have spent 2 years in the most dangerous court in the world, and you've learned it, and you've changed Joffrey, and you've made Jaime Lannister teach you sword forms, and you've made Varys choose your side, and those are not small things. They're not the throne, Jon said. No. The legitimate Targaryen heir is living in the Red Keep as the ward of the man who destroyed the Targaryen dynasty, Jon said. That is not a position that resolves itself. No, it's not. What does it resolve into? Ned held his gaze. That depends entirely on what you want, Ned said. And on Robert. And on what happens when the secret becomes less secret. He looked at the fire. I don't know what you want, Jon. 2 years in this city, and I don't know what you've become. Jon looked at the dark window. I want to not be a piece that other people play, he said. I want to make my own decisions about my own life. He held the window's gaze. I don't know if that's possible. I'm beginning to think that the blood doesn't allow it. The blood allows what you decide to do with it. The blood carries expectations, Jon said. Other people's expectations. Varys has expectations. Whatever Cersei is planning involves expectations. The Lords will have expectations when they find out. Everyone has expectations, and the expectations all require something different from me. He looked at Ned. What do you expect? That you'll do what's right, Ned said. That's not specific enough, Jon said. Not here. Not for what this city requires. No. Ned held his gaze. I know. I've always been better at identifying the right thing than navigating what the right thing requires. He held the gaze. That's why I sent you south, even though the sending was Robert's doing. Because you'd learn what I couldn't teach. Jon looked at his uncle. Have I? I think you're still learning it. He held the gaze. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to Robert, Jon said. Robert, the full conversation. 300 AC. Robert received him in the hunting room. Not the throne room, not the solar, the hunting room, which was where Robert went when he wanted to be in the castle, but not in the castle's function. The heads on the walls, the table covered in maps of hunting ground, the fire going and a cup in his hand, and the specific Robert atmosphere of a man who was between things and using the between time the way Robert used most things, by not being anywhere he was supposed to be. Jon came in and sat across from him without preamble. Robert looked at him. "Ned told you," Robert said. "He did. All of it. All of it." Robert held the cup. "How do you feel?" he said. Not a Robert question. Robert didn't usually ask how people felt. He ran over how people felt with the force of how he felt and called it conversation. But he was asking. "Like I'm 17, and I've just been told I have the strongest claim to the throne in the Seven Kingdoms," Jon said, "which is not comfortable." "No, wouldn't be." He drank. "What do you want to do with it? What are my options?" "I'm asking what you want." "I know. I'm working backward from the options because what I want may not be what's available." Jon held his gaze. "The options are nothing. I stay as your ward. The secret is held indefinitely. The risk is that the holding fails. Varys knows. Littlefinger suspects. Cersei is moving against me already because she senses something even if she doesn't know specifically what. If the holding fails and I haven't decided what I am, other people decide for me. And the other option. The other option is that the claim is made public. That we go to the Lords with the evidence, Ned, Howland Reed, the marriage documents, and the claim is formally presented." He held the gaze. "Which requires you to acknowledge that your dynasty was built on killing the man whose son is sitting in your hunting room, and that the boy you've been raising as your ward isn't your bastard, but your queen's worst political enemy." Robert held the cup. "There's a third option," Robert said. "What?" "You renounce the claim formally, in front of the Lords, officially, in exchange for a title and lands, and the specific legal acknowledgement that you exist and are known. Like legitimizing a bastard, like legitimizing a specific Targaryen heir as something that isn't a Targaryen heir, giving you a name and a place that makes the claim unclaimable without the renouncing being undone." He held the gaze. "You'd be lord of something. You'd have lands. You'd be out of the game. Legally." Jon held his gaze. "Would it work?" Jon said. "Legally, yes. Whether the realm would accept it, whether Varys and Littlefinger, and whoever else would accept it as final, is a different question." He put the cup down. "I've been thinking about this since the gods would in Winterfell. Since I saw you in the yard. I've been building options." He held the gaze. "The problem with all of them is you. What you actually want." "I want the wall," Jon said. Robert blinked. "The Night's Watch." "Yes." Jon held his gaze. "I've been reading about what's happening in the north. The ranging reports. The wildlings moving south. Whatever is building beyond the wall." He held the gaze. "I came to King's Landing because you brought me here. I've learned what there is to learn here. The thing I want, the actual thing, not the political option, is to go north and deal with what's building there. The wall," Robert said. He was not performing disbelief, he was processing. The specific Robert processing of unexpected information that required revision. "You want to go to the Night's Watch. I want to go to the wall. I don't need to be a watch brother to be at the wall. I could go as whatever I am after we decide what I am. A lord, a ward, a man who happens to have Targaryen blood, and who is going north, because the north is where the real problem is." "What problem?" "The dead," Jon said. "The army of the dead. The others. The thing that the Watch has been sending ravens about for years that the small council has been dismissing." He held Robert's gaze. I've been reading the reports. The cold is wrong. The rangings are finding things. Whatever is building north of the wall is more dangerous than anything happening south of it. Robert looked at him. You believe in the dead army, Robert said. I believe in the Watch's reports, which have been consistent for a decade, and in the wildling movement, which is documented, and in the cold pattern, which doesn't match any known meteorological cycle. He held the gaze. I believe in what can be verified. The verification says something is wrong. Most kings and lords dismiss that. Most kings and lords haven't read the reports carefully. Jon held the gaze. You have. I know you have. You've been providing the Watch with its funding for 15 years, even when the small council argued against it. You believe something is there. Robert was quiet. He was looking at Jon with the expression he used in the forests, the honest Robert that existed between trees, stripped of the performance of kingship. I believe something is there, he said. I don't know what it is. I know it worries the Watch, and I know the Watch is not composed of men who worry easily. He held the gaze. You want to go north and deal with the something. I want to go north and be there when it becomes necessary to deal with it, Jon said. Before it becomes necessary. To be in the place that matters when the thing that matters arrives. Robert stopped. That's the most Lyanna thing anyone has said to me in 15 years. Jon held his gaze. I don't think it was her choice, Jon said, going after the thing that mattered. I think it was who she was. Yes, Robert looked at the cup. It was exactly who she was. They sat in the hunting room. The fire, the heads on the walls. The specific quiet of a room that was between the performance and the reality of kingship. I'll announce the claim, Robert said, before the lords. The full truth. The marriage, the parentage, everything. I'll present it with Ned's testimony, and Reed's testimony, and I'll let the lords receive it. He held the gaze. And then you'll renounce it. Formally, in front of everyone. And I'll give you the north, not the wall. More than the wall. I'll give you the lordship of something specific with the authority to take whatever measures are needed to address what's building beyond the wall. Jon looked at him. Why announce the claim if I'm going to renounce it? Because the renouncing only means something if the claim is real first. He held the gaze. Because Varys will use the secret if we don't. Because Cersei will use the secret if we don't. Because Littlefinger will use the secret, and he'll use it for something that serves none of us if we don't take it out of his hands first. He held the gaze. The claim announced is information I control. The claim hidden is information someone else controls. I'd rather control my own catastrophes. Jon sat with this. The lords will have opinions about the claim, Jon said. Yes, some of them will prefer a living Targaryen heir to Joffrey. Some of them. You'll have to manage that. I've been managing things I didn't like for 15 years. He held the gaze. I'm better at the managing than at the liking. Jon looked at the fire. He thought about Winterfell. About the godswood and the cold and the 14 years of knowing he was the bastard and not knowing he was anything else. About the road south and the specific experience of leaving your home and arriving at someone else's. About 2 years in King's Landing that had been the specific education of a court, in reading people and reading rooms, and reading the gaps between what people said and what they meant. He thought about the wall, about the ranging reports, about the cold that was wrong, about the specific duty he felt toward the thing that was building, which was not the duty of an oath, but the duty of knowledge. Knowing what was there, and not going, was a specific kind of abandonment. I'll come back, Jon said, when it's done. When whatever is north of the wall has been dealt with. I'll come back, and I'll be whatever the realm needs me to be. What does the realm need you to be? I don't know yet. He held the gaze. But I'll know it when it gets there. Robert looked at him. He said, 15 years ago, I was in a river, and I was fighting the man whose eyes I'm looking at right now, and I was winning, and the winning was the most terrible thing I'd ever done. He held the gaze. I've spent 15 years trying to make the winning worth it. I don't know if I have. He looked at the cup. I know that you're worth more than the thing I'm drinking out of, which is the best I can do with the arithmetic. That's honest, Jon said. I'm sober. I'm in a room that's almost a forest. It's what I have. He stood. Go to the Lords with Ned tomorrow. I'll summon them. We'll do the announcing, then the renouncing. Then I'll send you north with everything you need and the authority to use it." He held Jon's gaze. "Don't die up there." "That's the plan," Jon said. He stood at the door. "Robert?" The king looked at him. "Thank you," Jon said, "for bringing me here, even if it was the wrong reason." "The reasons are usually wrong," Robert said. "The doing is what matters." Jon left. Robert sat alone in the hunting room. He poured the remaining wine into the fire and watched it burn. The announcement before the Lords, 300 AC. Robert summoned the Lords of the small council and the great lords present in the city, and whatever members of the court could be assembled in the throne room in 3 days, which was the time Ned needed to send for Howland Reed, and the time Jon needed to review the documentation, and the time Robert needed to drink less than usual, which he accomplished with the specific discipline of a man who understood that some things required sobriety, and that sobriety was something he could choose when the choosing was necessary. Cersei attended. She attended because she could not attend without the not attending being its own declaration, and declarations were what she was trying to avoid until she had better information about what was being declared. She came to the throne room in the specific Cersei armor of green and gold and perfect composure, and she sat in her seat, and she waited. Jon stood beside Robert's throne. Not on the dais, beside it. The position of a person who is present rather than presiding. The distinction mattered. The throne was Robert's. Jon was adjacent. Ned stood below the dais with Howland Reed, who had come south with the specific speed of a man who had been waiting for this summons for 16 years, and who had the documentation in a leather case under his arm. Robert looked at the assembled room. He said, "You're here because something needs saying that has needed saying for 16 years, and that I've been putting off saying, because the political implications were inconvenient." He held the room's attention. Nobody did this like Robert. Nobody held a room like a man who had been filling rooms since he was 18. "The young man standing beside me is Jon Snow. You know him as my ward. You have assumed various things about my ward, most of which are wrong. I am correcting them now." He said it plainly. That was the thing. He said it plainly. In the specific Robert register of a man who did not perform difficult truths, but delivered them the way you delivered things when you were tired of not delivering them. Jon was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. The parents had been legitimately married. The evidence existed and was here. Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell had protected the child for 16 years at Lyanna's dying request. Lord Howland Reed was here to confirm what he had witnessed at the Tower of Joy. The room was very quiet. In the quiet, Jon was aware of every person in it recalibrating. He could feel it, the specific collective reprocessing that happened when a room received information that changed the architecture of every assumption it had been operating on. He could feel Cersei to his left, not looking at him. The held composure that was costing her something he could almost hear. Howland Reed spoke. He was brief, and he was direct, and he said what he had seen, the way men from the Crannogs said things, which was without embellishment, because embellishment was what you used when you wanted to seem more credible than the plain truth made you. He had no need. He had been there. Ned spoke. He confirmed. He held the room's gaze, and he said, "Jon is Lyanna's son, and Rhaegar's son, and I have known this since he was hours old, and I am sorry it has taken this long." Then Jon spoke. He had prepared. He had spent 2 days preparing, which was not the Jon style. Jon's style was to understand what he was doing, and then do it without excessive preparation, because excessive preparation was a kind of performance, and he did not perform. But this required the specific preparation of something that would be heard and quoted and discussed for years, and that needed to be right. He said, "I am the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. I hold the strongest legal claim to the Iron Throne that currently exists. I am also 16 years old, and I have spent the last 2 years in this city learning it. And what I have learned is that the throne is not the most important thing happening in this realm right now." He let that land. The most important thing happening in this realm right now is north of the wall. The Night's Watch has been reporting it for a decade. The wildlings are moving south, and they are moving south because something north of them is worse than the wall. The dead are walking. I know that sounds like the stories that are told to children in the dark. It is not a story. It is the content of the Watch's reports. Documented, consistent, corroborated across multiple ranging parties over multiple years. He held the room. I am renouncing my claim to the Iron Throne. Not because the claim is not real. It is real. The evidence is before you. But because the claim requires a war that the realm cannot afford while the army of the dead is building at the wall. He held the room's attention. I am going north. The king has agreed to give me the authority and the resources to address what is building there. When the threat from the north has been addressed, the question of the throne can be revisited by whoever is still alive to revisit it. A short silence. The great Jon Umber, who had been in the city for trade and had been summoned along with everyone else, said from the back, "The dead don't walk." "I know that's the common view," Jon said. "I'd encourage you to read the Watch's reports. The common view has been wrong before." Lord Renly Baratheon said, "If you renounce, who's heir?" "That's a succession question for the king," Jon said. "I'm addressing the undead question. One at a time." There was not laughter. But the room moved, the specific small movement of people encountering something unexpected that they found either compelling or alarming. Tywin Lannister, who had ridden in overnight upon receiving the summons, said, "This renouncing is binding." "It's in writing," Jon said. "Witnessed. Dated, yes." Tywin looked at him with the specific Tywin assessment. "Why?" Tywin said. "Why what? Why renounce something of this magnitude?" He held the gaze. The claim is real. The Baratheon dynasty was built on defeating the Targaryens in the field. You could argue that the field is reopened. Why give that up for the Watcher's problem? Jon held Tywin Lannister's gaze. "Because I've been in this city for 2 years, and the city will still be here in 10 years, Jon said. "The wall might not be. The specific triage of those two facts produces an order of operations." He held the gaze. "I trust that the realm can manage its own succession. I'm not sure the realm can manage an army of the dead without someone going to deal with it." Tywin held the gaze. "You are either very wise or completely wrong," Tywin said. "Those are often the same situation," Jon said. The small council looked at Robert. Robert looked at the room. "Right," Robert said. "That's what I wanted to tell you. Questions go to the relevant lords. I'm going hunting." He stood. The room stood. He walked out. Jon watched the room begin to move. The lords finding each other. The conversation starting. The processing of a morning's worth of political recalibration, beginning to express itself in the specific social friction of people who needed to talk to other people immediately. Cersei walked to him. She came directly. No approach, no angling. She walked to Jon and stood in front of him and looked at him with the specific Cersei gaze when the performance was minimized and the actual Cersei was operating. "You're giving it up," she said. "I'm going north. You have the strongest claim in the 7 kingdoms and you're going to the wall." "I'm going north of the wall, eventually, yes." He held her gaze. "The claim doesn't disappear with me. It's documented, it's witnessed. If I die up there, the documentation persists, and whoever wants to use it can." He held the gaze. "But I'm not using it to threaten you. If that's what you're waiting to hear, I'm not." She looked at him. "You've been in my castle for 2 years," she said. "You've been..." She stopped. "Chose the rest. You've been useful to my son. Whatever else is true." "He's going to be a better king than the one I would have been," Jon said. "If you give him the room to be." She held his gaze. "That might be the most arrogant thing you've said to me." "Probably." He held her gaze. "It's also true." She did not smile. The Cersei face controlled itself, but something in it moved. "Go north," she said. "Stay there." She walked away. Jon watched her go. The lords. what they did with it. 300 AC. The announcement produced 3 letters in 3 days. The first was from Stannis Baratheon, delivered by Raven from Dragonstone. Stannis's letter was short. Stannis's letters were always short. The shortness communicated everything Stannis communicated, which was, I have considered this with the full force of my attention, and here is the result. The letter said, the claim is legitimate, and the renouncing is not. A legitimate claim does not disappear, because the claimant says it does. I accept Lord Jon Stark's right to the throne, and I note his renouncing on the record. The record will be there when it is needed. Jon read this in Ned's presence. He's saving it, Ned said. He's being honest, Jon said. Which is the specific Stannis thing. He's telling me what he thinks is legally true. He'll hold it. He won't use it against me while I'm going to the wall. But he'll hold it. Is that a problem? It's accurate, Jon said. The renouncing doesn't make the claim not real. Stannis knows that. If something happens to Joffrey, if the succession is ever in question again, Stannis will produce the record. He held the gaze. That's fine. The record exists. I'd rather Stannis hold it than Littlefinger. The second letter was from Tywin Lannister at Casterly Rock. Tywin's letter was longer than Stannis's, but the length was not warmth. The length was the legal architecture of a man who had just been told that his daughter's children's succession claim was adjacent to a living Targaryen heir, and who was constructing, in the letter, the specific response that managed the adjacency. The letter said essentially, the renouncing was welcome news. The expedition north was appropriately timed, and the crown would benefit from the stability that the removal of succession uncertainty produced. The crown's relationship with House Lannister remained as it was. House Lannister anticipated continued cooperation. Jon read it. He's saying the Queen is safe, Jon said. The Queen's position, Ned said. Her position. Her children's position. He's saying, you've cleared the succession question, and we're going to behave as though the other thing, the lineage question, the specific Lannister detail, is not in the conversation. He held the letter. He knows I know. Varys would have told him I found the book. He's managing it by pretending the managing isn't necessary. Tywin manages everything by pretending the managing isn't necessary, Ned said. I noticed that. It's actually very effective. Jon set the letter down. He'll keep Cersei in line. He always does. Whether keeping her in line is, whether it holds, that's a different question. The third letter was from Renly Baratheon, who was at Highgarden visiting the Tyrells. Renly's letter was charming, which was the thing Renly was best at. It was warm and personal and specific in the way that charming people wrote letters. It made you feel like the letter was only for you. It said he was delighted by the announcement and moved by the courage it took, and looking forward to meeting Jon properly when Jon returned from the north, and that the 7 went with him. Jon read it. He set it down. Renly, he said. Yes, Ned said. He's the most charming man in the realm, and he's telling me he's delighted. He may be genuinely delighted. He's also in Highgarden, visiting the Tyrells, who are the most powerful house in the realm after the Lannisters, and he's staying there for 6 months. Jon held the gaze. He's not delighted. He's calculating. The announcement tells him that the Targaryen succession question is not resolved, because Stannis is right that it can't be renounced, but publicly handled. The handling changes the political landscape in ways that Renly is assessing from Highgarden, with Mace Tyrell beside him. Ned held the gaze. You've been here 2 years, he said. Yes. 2 years ago, you didn't know what a political landscape was. 2 years ago, I was eating at the side table in Winterfell. Jon held his gaze. The court is efficient at teaching things. Fear is an excellent motivation to learn. Ned looked at his nephew. He thought, the North would not have done this. The North would have given Jon honor and endurance and the specific Stark qualities that were enormous and valuable. and that were not this. This, the reading of letters, the quick taxonomy of what a charming man from Highgarden was actually saying. This was King's Landing. He thought, Robert was right. The reasons were wrong and Robert was right. What about Littlefinger? Ned said. Littlefinger didn't write. Jon held the gaze. Which is the most informative letter he sent? Joffrey, before the leaving, 300 AC. Joffrey came to his rooms that evening. He came without the Kingsguard, the specific Joffrey gesture of wanting a private conversation, the learning that private conversations required fewer people. This was something he had learned in 2 years, and the learning was its own evidence of the teaching. He sat. He looked at the boxes. Jon was beginning to pack. You're actually going? Joffrey said. Yes. To the wall. Eventually, north first, then the wall. Jon held his gaze. The watch needs. It's complicated. What happens when the dead come? Joffrey said. We fight them. Who's we? Whoever is there. Jon held the gaze. Whoever is willing. Joffrey looked at the boxes. I could. He stopped. You're going to be king, Jon said. You can't come to the wall. I know that. He held the gaze with the specific Joffrey quality when he was being honest, rather than performing. I know I can't go. I was going to say something else. He held the gaze. I was going to say that I'll send what you need. When you need it. Men. Supplies. The watch has been underfunded for years, and I can fix that. If I'm king, I can fix that. Jon looked at him. The 12-year-old in the yard who had come to evaluate him was gone. 14 now. Joffrey had grown in the 2 years, physically and in the other way, the way that people grew when they were given the specific care of someone who treated them as capable of growing. You'll be a good king, Jon said. You said that to my mother. It's true for both of you in different ways. He held the gaze. Your mother's way is, she will protect you and manage the court and keep the machinery running. Your way is, you're going to get better at the part she can't do, which is being liked. People like the king who funds the wall. People like the king who takes the watch seriously. People like the king who doesn't condescend. He held the gaze. Don't condescend. I do sometimes, Joffrey said. I'm working on it. I know. It doesn't come naturally. Most important things don't. Jon held his gaze. You've been working on it for 2 years. Keep working on it. Joffrey looked at Ghost. The direwolf was lying in his usual position, full grown now, white and enormous, the red eyes watching the room. Take the wolf, Joffrey said. He's coming. He likes the north. He's never been to the north. He likes cold rooms, and you're never in warm ones. He held Jon's gaze. He'll like it. Jon looked at Ghost. Ghost, who had been assessed as out of place since they'd arrived, and who had maintained his specific ghost equilibrium in the face of 2 years of being out of place. The wolf adapted the way Jon had adapted, not by becoming something else, by becoming more specifically himself in the foreign environment. Write to me, Joffrey said. I will. About what you find up there. He held the gaze. And when things get, when you need the supplies, or the men, send word. I'll figure out how to get them to you. Jon held his gaze. Joffrey. What? You're going to have advisors who tell you the north doesn't matter, Jon said. The small council. Tywin. People who look at the map and think, the north is the north. It's always been there. It doesn't affect us. They're going to say that. And listen to the Watch's ravens before you listen to them. He held the gaze. Whatever else you do, listen to the Watch's ravens. Joffrey held the gaze. All right, he said. He stood. He started to leave. At the door. Jon. He turned. I knew you were lying, Joffrey said. About being a bastard. Not, I didn't know specifically. But something was wrong about it. You didn't move like someone who believed it. He held the gaze. You moved like someone with a weight they weren't carrying yet. He left. Jon stood in the room. He looked at Ghost. "Ready?" he said. Ghost stood. The north. What waited? 300 essays. He rode north with a company. Not a small one. Robert had been serious about the authority and the resources, and what the authority and the resources produced was 100 men, good ones, equipped with the specific supplies that Jon had specified after spending a month reviewing the Watch's reports and the ranging patterns and working out what the Watch needed that it didn't have. Dragonglass. Dragonstone had deposits of obsidian that the Watch had been requesting for years, and that the small council had been dismissing as the Watch's magical thinking. Robert had authorized the extraction and the shipment, and the 100 men included armorers who had been instructed in what Jon had learned about obsidian's reported effect on whatever the Watch's rangers were encountering. Jon had spent his last month in King's Landing reading everything available. Not just the Watch's reports, the histories. Maester Aemon's correspondence, which Jon had obtained through Pycelle, who had been persuaded through the specific Jon method of explaining calmly and consistently why the obtaining was important. The old stories, the long night, the last hero. He had a theory. The theory was not yet complete, but it had shape. The enemy was real. The obsidian worked. Fire worked. The wall had been built with something in its foundations that kept the enemy from crossing it directly, and whatever kept it from crossing directly might not hold forever. He rode north with the theory and the 100 men and the dragon glass and Ghost, who was in no way suited to riding in wagons, and who had made this point by walking beside the column for the first day, until Jon accepted that the wolf was going to walk, and the walking was fine. He rode through the riverlands, through the neck, through the north. He stopped at Winterfell. The reunion with Ned was brief and northern in the way that northern reunions were brief. The embrace, the standing together in the godswood, the unspoken acknowledgement of everything that had passed and everything that was still to come. Bran was 10 now. Robb was 17. Rickon was 5. Sansa was 14 and Arya was 11. Both girls had been young children when Jon left, and the 2 years had done what 2 years did to children who were already growing quickly. Sansa was almost as tall as Catelyn. Arya had spent those 2 years doing exactly what Jon would have predicted, which was learning to fight, and refusing to apologize for it. He stayed 3 days. He talked to Robb about the north, about what Robb knew of the Watch's reports, about the mood along the northernmost holdings, about what the people in the villages said. Robb had the specific Robb quality of knowing his people, not through study, but through the natural inclination of a lord who liked his people and who paid attention to them. What Robb knew about the north matched what Jon's reading had built toward. "It's bad up there," Robb said, on the second day, in the yard. "The men who come down from the north, from the holdings near the wall, they're afraid in a way that's not the usual north afraid, not the cold. The other thing. The dead," Jon said. "The dead." Robb held his gaze. "You really believe it?" "I believe the reports." He held his brother's gaze. "The reports come from rangers. Rangers are the best trained men the Watch has. When they come back scared from rangings, it's not because they're stupid." He held the gaze. "Something is there." Robb looked north. "What do you need from the north?" Robb said. "From Winterfell? From us?" Jon looked at him. "Men," Jon said, "when the time comes." "I don't know when. The Watch is handling it now, and the Watch can handle it for a while. But when the wall is tested, when whatever is building becomes what it's building toward, the Watch will need the north." "You'll have the north," Robb said. "Simply the Stark way, the thing that was true stated without performance." "I know." Jon held his gaze. "Take care of father. He's been carrying things alone too long." "I noticed that after you left," Robb said. "He was lighter when you were here." Jon looked at the yard, at the walls, at Winterfell in the winter light. "I'll come back," he said. "I know you will." Robb held the gaze. "Don't come back dead." "That's the plan," Jon said. He rode north. He rode through 3 days of increasingly cold and increasingly quiet, and arrived at Castle Black in the specific moment that Castle Black was always in, which was preparing for the next thing, while the last thing was still being resolved. Mormont received him. Lord Commander Jorah Mormont, who was the specific kind of old man who had been made older by the specific things he had seen, and who was handling the oldness by continuing to work. He looked at Jon and the 100 men and the wagons of dragonglass, and he said, "The king sent you." "The king sent me," Jon confirmed. "Why?" "Because I asked him to." He held the gaze. "Because the Watch has been asking for help for a long time, and nobody in the south was paying attention." "What are you here to do?" "Whatever you need," Jon said. "And to be here when it becomes necessary to be here." Mormont held his gaze. He said, "The brother with the direwolf." Ghost was at Jon's side, enormous, white, red-eyed, entirely at home in the cold in a way that he had never quite been at home in King's Landing. "His name is Ghost," Jon said. "He's a direwolf. He is." "I've heard about direwolves," Mormont said. "Haven't seen one in years. Not since before I was Lord Commander." "They're north of here," Jon said. "Or they were." Mormont looked at Ghost. "Come inside," he said. "Tell me what the king's representative is planning." Jon came inside. He told Mormont everything. The Lord Commander listened with the patience of a man who had been waiting for someone with authority to say exactly these things, and who was managing the relief carefully, because relief in his position was a luxury he couldn't afford. "The dragonglass," Mormont said. "In the wagons, the armorers know how to shape it. We'll arm every ranger. The dead don't die from steel. We've been learning this." He held Jon's gaze. "The obsidian?" "Reports from old ranging parties, the ones that came back, suggest it works." "Suggest?" "It's the best we have." He held the gaze. "Fire works. Obsidian works. We work with what we know until we know more." Mormont held his gaze. He said, "Who are you, specifically?" "Robert's ward, or I'm the man who's here," Jon said. "That's the specific thing that matters." Mormont looked at him. He said, "You're welcome at Castle Black, whatever you are." Jon sat in the Lord Commander's office and looked out the window. The wall. 700 feet of ice. Built 8,000 years ago for exactly this purpose. The specific, enormous structure that communicated, by existing, that the threat it was built for was real. He thought, "I'm in the right place." He thought, "The right place took 2 years of the wrong place to find." He thought, "That's all right. Some roads go the long way." Ghost put his head on Jon's knee. Jon put his hand on the wolf's head. The wall outside the window. The cold. The north. Home. Maester Aemon, the last Targaryen, speaks. 300 AC. Maester Aemon's cell was warm and dark and smelled of old paper and the specific antiquity of a man who had been alive long enough that the world had reorganized itself around him 3 times. Jon came to him the morning after arriving at Castle Black. Not because Mormont sent him, because Jon had read Aemon's correspondence in King's Landing, had been reading it for 2 years, had learned through the correspondence what Aemon was, and what Aemon had been, and what Aemon had given up in choosing the wall over the dynasty. He sat across the old man. Aemon turned his blind face toward him. "You're new," Aemon said. "Jon Snow, from King's Landing." He held the gaze that couldn't see him. "From Winterfell before that." "Snow!" The old man's hands were folded. "That's a bastard name." "It was," Jon said. "I have a different name now, technically. Robert Baratheon's ward, Jon of House Stark. The technical name comes with legal complications that are documented and on file with the small council." He held the blind gaze. "But Snow is what I've been called." Aemon was quiet. "The ward Robert brought north," he said. "Yes. I heard about that. Ravens travel." He was quiet. "Why have you come to see me? Most new arrivals don't know to come to me immediately." "I read your correspondence," Jon said. In King's Landing, the letters you exchanged with the small council over 40 years, your arguments about the Watch's funding, the ranging reports you summarized, the history of the Wall's protocols. He held the gaze. You understand what is north of the Wall better than anyone alive. I understand what the Wall was built for, Aemon said. Whether I understand what is currently north of it, I have reports. Reports and inference. Tell me, Jon said. They talked for 3 hours. Aemon told him what he knew. Not the stories, the evidence, the systematic accounting of what the Watch had observed over the decades of his tenure, and what the patterns in the observation suggested. The cold cycles, the movement of the dead, the behavior of the Whites that Rangers had encountered and survived encountering, which was the specific category of Ranger whose reports were credible, because the ones who had been wrong about it were the ones who hadn't come back. He told Jon about the Dragonglass, that it worked, that the old texts described why. Something in the obsidian disrupted the magic that animated the dead, which meant the magic was a real thing operating on a real mechanism and not simply metaphor. He told Jon about fire. Same principle. He told Jon about the Wall, that the Wall was not simply ice, that it had been built with something in its foundations, something older, the specific old magic of the first men who had built it before the Andals arrived, and before the Seven replaced the old gods, and before the world had forgotten what the Wall was for. The Wall holds because of what it is, Aemon said, but what it is has been maintained for 8,000 years by people who didn't fully understand what they were maintaining. If the maintenance fails, does it matter what you are? Jon said. For the Wall, the blood, Targaryen blood. Aemon was quiet. My great-great-nephew asks about his blood, the old man said. Jon held the gaze. He knows, Jon said. He knew when he sat down. Aemon folded his hands. The question of whether the blood matters, I don't know. I have never been north of the Wall. I have never faced what is north of it directly. What the prophecies say about the blood, and what the blood actually does in practice, are two different bodies of evidence, and I am only fluent in one. The prophecies say, I am the prince who was promised. The prophecies say something of that kind. The prophecies are ambiguous, as prophecies must be, because specificity would allow interference. He held the blind gaze in Jon's direction. What I know is, you are here. You have authority and resources, and a direwolf and the education of 2 years in King's Landing. Whether the blood matters in addition to those things, you'll find out. That's not reassuring. No. Aemon's mouth moved in the specific ancient way of a man who had been called upon to reassure people for 100 years, and who had run out of the thing that made reassurance comfortable, which was certainty. But it is honest. Jon sat with the old man. They talked until the candles had burned down to stubs, and the cell was lit only by the fire. I wanted to ask you one more thing, Jon said. Ask. You gave it up, Jon said. The throne, the dynasty, your family. You chose the Wall. Was it? He held the gaze. Was it the right choice? Aemon was quiet for a long time. I've had 100 years to think about it, he said. And I still don't know if it was the right choice. I know it was the choice I could live with. I know the Wall needed someone who understood what it was for, and who wouldn't leave when it became difficult. He held the firelight. I know I'm still here. That's not the same as right. But it's something. Jon held the gaze. I'm still here too, he said. Yes. Aemon reached out and found Jon's hand and held it for a moment, the papery grip of a very old man. You are. And the Wall is glad of it. The Wall has been waiting for someone who was sent for the right reason, and who came for a different one. He released the hand. Go sleep. The first ranging is in 3 days. Jon stood. Maester Aemon. Yes. Thank you for staying. 40 years at the Wall when you didn't have to, thank you. The old man's face did something. "I've been thanked by 2 people in 100 years, he said. The first was Robb Stark's father, when Eddard came to visit his brother. The second is you." He turned back to his fire. Both times it was a Stark. Jon left. He stood in the corridor outside, and the cold of Castle Black wrapped around him. The institutional cold, the black stone cold, the specific cold of a place that was old enough to have made peace with its climate. Ghost padded up beside him. The direwolf was entirely at home. The wall agreed with Ghost in the specific way that very cold places agreed with very large white animals. "Ready," Jon said to no one specific. He went to his assigned quarters. He slept. What if Robert Baratheon took Jon Snow to King's Landing? He did it badly first. He did it the way Robert did everything, with the enormous Robert will, and without the architecture to support the will, without asking whether Jon wanted to go, or whether Ned could survive the losing, or whether Cersei would manage the arrival, or whether King's Landing would know what to do with a wolf in the East Tower and a northern boy in its corridors. He brought Jon to King's Landing because he had found a piece of Lyanna, and he could not leave a piece of Lyanna in Winterfell, and the reasons were the wrong reasons, and the outcome was the right one, which is the specific Robert Baratheon life story compressed. The court did not know what to do with Jon. Neither did Cersei. Neither did the small council. Neither did Littlefinger, who found that he couldn't quite get a grip on the boy the way he got a grip on most things. The specific Jon quality of saying what he actually thought was the specific thing that made manipulation difficult. Because manipulation required the gap between what someone appeared to be and what they were, and Jon didn't have much gap. Jaime found something he hadn't found in the training yard in 20 years, which was a student who taught him things. Joffrey found something he hadn't found anywhere, which was someone who treated him as capable of better, and who turned out to be right. Varys found something he hadn't found in his life in the Red Keep, which was a person whose interests aligned with the realm's interests, without the person trying to align them. Jon's interests were the realm's interests, not because Jon was selfless. Because Jon had sat in the library and read the reports and done the arithmetic, and the arithmetic produced a single answer, which was, the wall matters more than the throne right now. Robert found something he didn't deserve, which was the specific delayed thing that he should have built over 15 years of being king and hadn't. He found a purpose that was not the throne, and not the hunting, and not the wine, and that was attached to a person who was attached to Lyanna, and who was therefore the closest Robert could get to the feeling that the winning had been worth something. It was not enough. It was not enough to fix Robert, or to fix the marriage, or to fix the specific damp rot at the center of the Baratheon court that Cersei's paranoia and Robert's neglect had been producing for 15 years. Jon spending 2 years in the Red Keep did not repair the throne. It did not heal the realm. It did not resolve the problems that were building in the Riverlands and the Westerlands, and the plots that were already in motion in rooms that Jon never entered. It did one thing. It sent Jon Snow north with dragonglass and authority, and the specific knowledge of court politics that the North had never given him, and that the Wall alone would not have produced. It sent him to Castle Black with Mormont's trust, and the Watch's cooperation, and the ability to write letters to the King of the Seven Kingdoms and receive responses, which was not a thing the Watch had been able to do in living memory. And it sent him to the right place at the right time, which is the other Robert Baratheon life story compressed. The one that was not about what Robert intended, but about what Robert produced by being the specific enormous disaster of himself. Robert had always been better at results than methods. The methods were catastrophic. The results were occasional and significant. This was one of the significant ones. Jon Snow arrived at Castle Black with Ghost and the Dragonglass and the 100 men and the authority of the crown and the specific education of 2 years in the most dangerous political environment in Westeros. He arrived knowing how runes worked and what people wanted and how to read the gap between the two. He arrived knowing how to write letters that produced responses and how to make allies of people who weren't naturally allies and how to be present in a room without disappearing into the room. He arrived knowing who he was. Not all of what being Rhaegar's son and Lyanna's son meant. That was still building, still accumulating. The prophecy still folded somewhere in his blood, waiting for the moment it chose to unfold. But the core of it, what he valued, what he was willing to do, what he was not willing to do, what he was going to go toward, even when the going was dangerous. He arrived at Castle Black, and he looked at the wall, and the wall was the thing he had been moving toward since he was 14 years old, in a yard in Winterfell, being looked at by a king who had come north without announcing himself, and who had seen his mother in his eyes. Rhaegar Targaryen had believed in prophecy. Jon Snow did not believe in prophecy. Jon Snow believed in the ranging reports, and the cold that was wrong, and the wildlings moving south, and the specific empirical evidence of things that required responses regardless of what you called them. He believed in obsidian and fire, and the specific training that Jaime Lannister had given him in the inner yard, and the specific understanding that Varys had given him about how runes worked. He believed in Ghost, who was home. He believed in the wall, which was the right place. He believed in doing the necessary thing, which was what Ned had taught him, and what Robert had confirmed, and what King's Landing had tested, and which was still, after all of it, the most honest piece of himself that he carried. The wall needed someone who would look at the reports and believe them. The wall needed someone who could write to the king and be heard. The wall needed someone who understood that the dead were coming, and that the coming required preparation rather than disbelief. It needed Jon Snow. Jon Snow was there. The wall behind him. Ghost at his side. The cold that was wrong building in the north, visible if you looked north from the wall's top. The specific dark that wasn't weather but intention. He looked north. He thought, I know what you are. He thought, I'm here. He thought, come.